at Revolutionary Clinics on cooking with cannabis. It's one of my favorite things to do. Of course, most people are familiar with cooking sort of brownies. You start with flour and plant material, you bake it in the oven, and then you mix that into butter, and then you use that butter to make sort of cookies, chocolates. That's the traditional way people think of making edibles at home. But my favorite way is to use distillate oil that you can pick up at a dispensary. And then you can basically make any food you like, and then you just put a little dollop of oil at the very end of your process. It's a lot easier, but we made a whole Thanksgiving smorgasbord last year, and we actually put out some new videos this year on how to basically make an entire medicated Thanksgiving. So I love infusing food and consuming edible cannabis.
Well, I consumed on my Thanksgiving day edible, and it was, let's just say, enlightening. How's that? Is that a good word? That's a good word, right?
Absolutely. Absolutely. I'd agree.
I was lit up the whole day, basically. Now, I'm not quite sure I was totally under control the whole day, but no one in my immediate family really cared. So that's the most important thing. And it was extremely relaxing and certainly memorable. But speaking of memorable, we've got two major stories in the cannabis space to talk about right off the bat here, Andrew, and both have to do with the world starting to accept the medicinal benefits of the cannabis plant. We're going to start in the United States of America, and we'll get into this a little bit later on the show as well. But I do want to start with this, the fact that the Congressional Committee, the U.S. House of Representatives Congressional Committee, has approved the passage or the acceptance of moving the MORE Act onto the full floor of the U.S. House of Representatives. And this is really the first step towards legalization of cannabis in the United States, opening up the banks, expunging records, and there's all sorts of different caveats that have been added now to this. But first of all, what's your reaction to the fact that we're actually moving forward here in the United States towards a step towards legalization?
Well, I'm really excited and am glad to champion any and every step towards legalization federally across the entire United States. I think there are a lot of really ridiculous, counterproductive laws currently in place, right? We have the U.S. government holds patents on certain forms of CBD. The U.S. government is researching certain forms of CBD, which is derived from cannabis, is derived from marijuana. And then at the same time, you have a Schedule 1 narcotic classification, which by definition, it's the same. It's up there with methamphetamine. Cocaine is even a Schedule 2. So marijuana, according to the government as it stands today, marijuana is just as dangerous and deadly as methamphetamine. It basically, there are some really counterproductive laws that I would love to see stripped back, frankly, making it easier for legitimate businesses to enter the cannabis space serves everyone, right? We see crime rates go down. We have examples like California, Colorado, Oregon. We've seen property values go up in locales where we have dispensaries moving in. There's a lot of money to be made in the cannabis space. I think we're growing faster than the technology sector at this point, even throughout COVID. So there's a lot of opportunity in cannabis, and frankly, I'm glad that even if it's baby steps, we have to take baby steps to make real progress.
So the idea here that the MORE Act would be removing cannabis from the Controlled Substances Act, and that's the referral that you made towards that Schedule 1 classification that has been really hypocritical, if you will, because you mentioned the fact that the government had a patent on CBD, which is derived from the cannabis plant. And if you're a Schedule 1 drug, you're not supposed to have any medicinal qualities at all. And oops, I guess there actually are. And again, all those people who have been in the trenches, the people from NORML and Marijuana Policy Project and so many other advocates and the NCIA, the lobbyist group in Washington, D.C., have worked so hard on moving the green wave into Washington, D.C., and moving it towards at least some legitimacy and some respect for what this plant has done because of all that anecdotal evidence out there. And, it's not lost on me that this is the U.S. House of Representatives that is controlled by the Democratic Party. We all recognize that the Republican Party controls the U.S. Senate. So just because this vote, a historic vote nonetheless, will go to the floor, the U.S. House of Representatives, on Friday of this week, okay? We all know that even if it passes 310 to 130 or whatever the numbers end up being, it's going to fall flat on its face. It's never going to reach the floor of the Senate, certainly not during a lame duck Congress. Kind of frustrating, but those are the facts. And I think this is more of a symbolic vote at this point, you think, Andrew?
I would agree. Even if we are locked up, frankly, I think it's about shifting people's minds over time, right? Famous example, Vermont state, famously the Green Mountain State. I believe it was 2016, they chose not to legalize cannabis at the same time that Massachusetts did choose to legalize cannabis. 2 years later, the question was back on the ballot. So Vermont saw the success in Massachusetts, and they changed their tune because they see that there's a great deal of money to be made. I believe Colorado in their first year brought in $1 billion in sales to their state. That's $200 million in tax revenue that they're now putting into homeless initiatives, that education. They're calling these green projects. They're building affordable housing. There's all of this incredible work that can be done through legal cannabis, through taxing a product, not so differently than we tax alcohol, another substance that we tried prohibition with alcohol. It didn't work very well. So little by little, even if it takes 10 votes or 2 votes or 5 votes to shift people's mind, even I think there's a lot of power to symbols, Jimmy. So I think even if this is symbolic this time, it could mean real change the next time. That's what we got to fight for.
And in the House of Representatives, it is a bipartisan support for this bill. It's one of the reasons why they want to get it to the floor, because they recognize that there is a consensus between both Republicans and Democrats to move forward with this, sending a message perhaps to their Senate brethren that perhaps they shouldn't just vote along party lines and actually look at the bigger picture on this. And I am not confident that the Senate, led by Mitch McConnell, is going to do anything at all. In fact, he's one of the biggest prohibitionists. You can call him a few other names if you'd like. Turtle face is one that I actually think is accurate. But I do want to mention one quote from Stephen Hawkins, who is the executive director of the Marijuana Policy Project. He says, following today's favorable vote, and this is the committee, members of the U.S. House of Representatives on both sides of the aisle now have the opportunity and responsibility to come together and pass the important piece of legislation that is the MORE Act. The prohibition and criminalization of marijuana has led to decades of injustice and devastating consequences, and it's clear that a strong majority of Americans do not support the status quo. It is past time for Congress to take real action, and of course that is supported by the latest Gallup poll that was released, I want to say 2 weeks ago, maybe 3, where 68% of Americans favor legalization of cannabis. So this is a pretty big moment in the historic time that we are in right now. And one of the provisions of this MORE Act has to do with allowing VA physicians to recommend medical cannabis to veterans. I don't know if you know this, Andrew.
I do know this. So I'm happy to take this one, Jimmy. So right now, as the system exists, for veterans who receive medical benefits through the VA, right? So the VA, the Veterans Association, which cares for wounded and returning veterans, who provide psychological counseling services, doctor's appointments, just as Planned Parenthood does a whole lot more than, what we might think of Planned Parenthood for. They do all kinds of preventative care and health checkups. The VA does that in much the same way, a similar gambit of services, from psychological, medication. But if you are a veteran who is taking advantage of VA benefits, the VA is a federally mandated, funded program. And this is the same issue we run into, where cannabis is still not federally legal, which means the VA will not have anything to do with you. So we've worked with veterans at Revolutionary Clinics who've told us that I have a choice. I have a choice between all the opiates and pain pills. I can eat them like candy until they kill me, or I can, and all of it will be paid for. U.S. government will pay for every pill for me to pop, or I can pay my own way with medical cannabis. And we have so many people who are making the really difficult choice to turn to cannabis because they've tried opiates and the painkillers are either in the best case making their lives harder to manage, and in the worst case really having severe detrimental impacts from dependency.
Right. And I know, and both of us have met plenty of people who have said how cannabis has saved their lives or changed their lives because they were addicted to opioids, and it did give them that opportunity to get off it. So again, the MORE Act, which, by the way, I'm pretty sure was co-authored by a certain vice president-elect named Kamala Harris. That's not lost on me either, that they're moving this forward. It really is a symbolic gesture. I'll be shocked if it ever sees the light of day in the U.S. Senate, as long as Mitch McConnell is breathing and running that show. But, you know, this has been a very strange year, Andrew. A lot of strange things have happened for the first time. That word unprecedented has been used quite a few times to describe what's going on with the pandemic. And now I think you can make that same analogy with what's going on with cannabis in Washington, D.C. right now. Pretty amazing. But
really amazing.
As we say in the broadcast world, that's not all, because there's another big story going on, and this one's international. And again, I'm not sure that this is as symbolic, perhaps, because the United Nations Commission on Narcotic Drugs on Wednesday, that would be today because we are live, accepted a World Health Organization recommendation to remove cannabis and cannabis resin from Schedule 4 of the 1961 Single Convention on Narcotic Drugs. Now, unlike the United States, where Schedule 1 is the most restrictive, I'm pretty sure that Schedule 4 on the international arena is the most restrictive. And they would certainly like to remove it. And we'll have to see. I know that the UN in the past, they've had a few votes in the past and it didn't go very well, let's say. But in this particular case, they are the Commission on Drugs is basically saying we should be removing this. And like so many associations and bureaucratic organizations, they've got to go through these committees first before they actually have a big vote to make the change. But there's a lot of this stuff going on. It's pretty amazing what's going on, all in one day, I might add.
Yeah, really incredible. It seems like the whole world is, like I said, baby steps sometimes are what it takes, but it's really exciting to see how progress in one state in the United States is allowing, like our progress here in Massachusetts is empowering states like Michigan, Pennsylvania, Vermont, New Jersey, as they build their own fledgling cannabis programs. But every system is coming up a little bit on its own, right? Because we don't have federal legalization. If we did, we might see something more akin to a top-down, like consistent strategy of implementation. Right now, everyone's still experimenting.
Right, and this really will open up international research, which I think is really one of the most important things, to study how this plant that God put on this earth for many reasons, one is to balance many humans, can have medical benefits. So Andrew and I are going to continue to talk about the news of the day, but as we do every time we do a live show on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays here from the Pro Cannabis Media studios, we take a break around 4:20 and I get to talk about one other little item that's been going on. And I'll mention that the MJ BizCon is going on right now live all over the internet. Hundreds of countries are involved. They've had their keynote address by the CEO of Whole Foods Market. His name is John McKay. And Chris Walsh, who's the CEO of MJ BizCon, welcomed everybody today. So that is going on as well. In fact, it was about a year ago, almost to the day, that we were covering the MJ BizCon in Las Vegas, Nevada last year, and we all hope to be together again next year in Las Vegas. But as we get closer to 420, quick mention of the fact that this 420 code that is embraced by the cannabis culture started at the high school of San Rafael, California. A bunch of guys called the Waldos. They used to meet at the Louis Pasteur statue outside the high school at 20 past 4 to celebrate the end of the day and catch a buzz. And sure enough, law enforcement, being those sharp people that they are, figured out that perhaps they should start using that code 420 as a code, public consumption of cannabis going on at the location of wherever the 420 was called in. The cannabis culture now embraces that. They celebrate April 20th. They celebrate the 20-minute past 4 o'clock time. And that's why we celebrate by sharing a song that had that same effect on moi back in the day in the 60s and 70s. It was called Shanty. It was written by a guy named Jonathan Edwards from New Hampshire. He performed it live. We got it on YouTube. So sit back and listen to the words and sounds of Jonathan Edwards as he sings one of my favorite songs, Shanty. We'll be back with more after this.
Yeah, this is a tune that I wrote back in 19... I've forgotten. We had a saying in our old band, one of my first bands in 1966 or so. What are you going to do tonight? Oh, just... you know, like every other night, just gonna lay around the shanty and put a good buzz on. Gonna sit down in the kitchen, fix me something good to eat. Make my head a little high, make the whole day complete. Gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. Pass it to me, baby, pass it to me slow. We'll take time out to smile a little before you let her go. We're gonna lay around the shanty, oh mama, and put a good buzz on. You're on something. Go ahead. Rick Brodsky, everybody. Nothing to do and there's always room for more. Fill it, light it, shut up and close that door, baby. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. Take it, okay. Prohibition never works, it's time to realize it. It grows in my backyard, it's time to legalize it. We're gonna lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on. I'm going to sit down in my rented car. I'm going to jam it into drive. I'm going to head on out and play at WSCA with Sean. I'm glad I'm alive. We're going to lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on every night and day. We're going to lay around the shanty, mama, and put a good buzz on.
Take your Zoom call podcasts or webinars to a whole new level.
Nurse Mark and the Green Nurse Podcast. We are here.
That's right. PCM can animate your logo, add eye-catching full-screen graphics, and lower third identifying motion graphics. Look like the network. Act like the network.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Gonna sit down in the kitchen. Oh, hey, everybody. Welcome back to Cannabis Chat for Wednesday afternoon. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media, joined by Andrew Elk from the Revolutionary Clinics. And what's up? What's new at Revolutionary Clinics, Andrew? What are you guys up to? You're always up to something there.
We are. Latest updates from Revolutionary Clinics are, just taking COVID precautions really seriously and reinvigorating those precautions every day. We're really proud of our remote team. So with this is a group of individuals. Basically, we've created a new service at Revolutionary Clinics that I think is unique in the cannabis dispensary world right now, where we actually have a dedicated team of folks who answer the phones, right? They don't come into the store. If you want to schedule a virtual consultation, like we still have, we have doors open at our Central Square location so people can walk in and place orders. But we're still guiding people through the online pickup process, right? Everyone, it seems, has become a better online shopper during this COVID time, and that is true of the cannabis industry as well. So we're really proud of both our gains and our remote team. So right now you can go to revolutionaryclinics.org or RevClinics, RevClinics.org. And right on the menu bar, there's a button that says Become a Patient. And then right under there, you can actually click a button. It's one click to schedule a virtual appointment with one of our fantastic team members, our Canna Mom, Barb Van Hoosen, a top 25 nationally ranked bud tender. Or actually, we have two nationally ranked, our Canna Mom and our Canna Kid, Barb Van Hoosen and Joe Casper, who have been with us at RevClinics now for 2+ years. And they are leading our virtual consultations team. So folks who need like an hour conversation to figure out what the right product is for them, people who need 5 minutes just to ask a very, very specific question, somebody who just needs to know a little bit more. We're really proud of being able to offer this service in a way that we never could before when we had the doors open. We didn't yet have a dedicated team. And then delivery, right? Delivery, we're ever expanding further and further out into Massachusetts. So again, revolutionaryclinics.org, there's a button that says order online right on the menu there. You can select the delivery menu. And we are delivering to more and more locations every day. So it's really convenient. Again, all of these changes we've made to make us ourselves a better business during COVID.
And I'm a very satisfied customer. I've used the online service a lot. And I've also used the delivery service, which I found intriguing. We come on this live stream and I find out, by the way, we're being viewed all over the world, which is fascinating to me unto itself. Italy, South Africa, Australia. We get comments from people in our chat room from all over the world now, which is fun. I mean, I think that's the beauty of being live, because you really don't know who's out there watching. And not only, by the way, are we competing against MJ BizCon, which is going on right now, but we're also competing against the National Football League today. And I got to tell you, this may be the first time that I really didn't want to be here. I'm sorry. I mean, I'd like to see if the Pittsburgh Steelers could stay unbeaten against the COVID depleted Baltimore Ravens. I think they've got something like 20, not just players, but staffers, all on the COVID IR list, which means they're not eligible to play, but they are going to play today, in fact, Wednesday afternoon as we speak, since we're live. But before we digress even more into other discussions, I do see that our special guest is getting situated in front of her camera as we speak, and we're so happy to have reconnected with Dr. Mary Clifton. Hello, Dr. Mary. How are you today?
Hi, just great. Great to connect with you again. How are you, Jimmy?
I'm doing fine, and I'm joined by Andrew Elk, who is a...
Hi there, Mary.
Hi.
He is with a medicinal dispensary in the greater Boston area, Revolutionary Clinics. It's where I go for my medicine. And I've been working with them for at least since 2018 when I first started this whole thing. And I'm big fans of their operation and how they handle things. And it's really interesting. Andrew actually mentioned something, and I'm going to digress a little bit here, Mary, just for a second, that there's actually rankings of bud tenders. Did I hear that right? There's actually
I didn't know that.
Right?
There is. I didn't know that.
Andrew, is that true?
Yes, there are many organizations, the most famous, like bud tenders, cannabis plants themselves, genetics, like there's many professional ranking systems in cannabis. The most famous ranking system is probably known as the Cannabis Cup, right? That's an award show that happens in California, Colorado, has been going on since the 90s. Relatively recently, yes, this was a Sensi magazine, which I believe is a national cannabis publication, put out their top 25 national bud tenders. And we had 2 team members make the top 25. Our Canna Mom, who's been on the back of several magazine covers, she leads our virtual consultations team. And then the Canna Kid, who is very sort of baby-faced but incredibly intelligent Joe Casper, who is just a phenomenal patient advocate bud tender. We're so proud to have both of them on our team.
Boy, I have somebody I could nominate. I mean, I worked with a bud tender back in Michigan, but I'd love to connect with some of these people and, bring some of their knowledge into my training program, and make sure that we have, because I'm sure they have tools and information that I haven't even thought of sharing yet. I mean, they are just such a wealth of knowledge. Like they say about doctors, that when you get a doctor first out of medical school, they're really smart, but they just haven't seen a lot of patients. And then they get their feet under them. And, by the time a doctor hits their stride in their 30s, probably up until sort of my age, that they do okay. But when you get into your 50s, if you're not reading and if you're not keeping up on your continuing med, you're going to fall behind a little bit. But, a doctor in that 35 to 50 range is a good spot where they can say, I've seen, or my experience has been, and it matters. It doesn't matter when they're saying that when they're 25, and they might be just a little too old when they get too old. But that's what I love about the bud tenders is they have that experience. They're standing in front of people every day and they can say, my experience has been, and then that's super powerful.
Now let's I'm going to read the quick bio of Dr. Mary Clifton, if you don't mind. I think anybody who's watched this show regularly recognizes who we have on, and I appreciate that. But she's a board certified licensed internal medicine doctor, a recognized expert in CBD, cannabis, and the founder of CBD and cannabisinfo.com, which is where you can find that. She gives a professional certification in the cannabinoid protocol. And you've also had time to write a book, The Grass is Greener, Medical Marijuana, THC, and CBD Oil. And then I love this, Reversing Chronic Pain, Inflammation, and Disease, and Get Wasted, as well as 5 other companion cookbooks.
Yeah.
I mean, what do you do in your spare time, Mary? Come on.
Well, you know what? I actually have a book that is so gorgeous that I'm really proud of. That's not that I don't love my other work, but this is such a nice book coming out. It's going to be available at Barnes and Noble April 20th. Is the launch date. It's the Cannabis Handbook. And we're going to put together, I'm hoping for a really beautiful documentary to support the book, at the same time. So that's my spring project. That's my winter and spring project. While the snow is swirling, it'll give me a good excuse to not go outside.
There you go. And I'll tell you, I'm going to, it's not a competitor because, as you know, we're all about educating the public, right? And we all know that there's a ton of public and a ton of education, right? There are other people out there who have books. I want to give equal time, if that's okay. Ruth Fisher. Do you know Ruth Fisher?
Yeah, I think I've seen this book.
Yeah, this is really, again, it's a primer, okay? And ushering in the golden age of marijuana. And we interviewed her and she sent me this book. So I'm obviously looking forward to reading your book too. Don't kid yourself. And more importantly, we'll be happy to air that documentary too. But they really, it's an incredible tool. There's a chart now in my office about the ratio between CBD and THC and the different diagnoses and what they recommend, or at least have heard anecdotally about the type of ratio between CBD and THC. And of course, this lends itself to a conversation about that entourage effect, because the whole plant medicine, CBD versus THC, just two of the most well-known cannabinoids in this plant. There are so many that they're still discovering every day now that research is ongoing. So I look forward to seeing your spin on this. And, you know, the word fascinating describes what's going on with this green wave. We talked about at the top of the hour, the World Health Organization and the UN looking to perhaps reschedule, if not deschedule, cannabis internationally. We heard about the MORE Act moving into the House of Representatives, perhaps to get a whole floor vote on Friday.
Yeah.
There's a lot of moving parts going on here. How do you?
And you heard about the UN this morning. Isn't that so neat? Isn't that so neat?
Look, I think it's amazing. And I'm going to say this internationally, and, you know, I have a background in sports, so I always throw this out there. You know that the FIFA World Cup in 2018, okay, this is the biggest sporting event in the world every 4 years. It's an international soccer tournament. And they were the first major sports event to not test for CBD as a banned substance. And that was 2 years ago on an international, and here we are 2 years later, finally seeing another international effort to perhaps give it some respect as a medicinal product. So I guess my question to you, Mary, is as you look back at the last half dozen years, I'm amazed at how quickly we have moved the needle.
Yeah. Oh, I really think when it came into my perception was when the cannabis workers were considered essential workers. It was clear that they're recognizing cannabis as medicine and as valuable medicine that people can't do without. That was a very powerful moment for me, that the dispensaries were able to stay open as essential. And I think you're right. I keep watching all of these developments and being amazed one after another at how we've gone from something that is under a strict prohibition, and really in the space of a couple of decades, I think we're moving to federal legalization. I was just at the MJ BizCon in Las Vegas. You know, of course, it's all so unfortunately and so depressingly online because there's just no place in the world that's as much fun as Vegas, in my opinion. But so I sure wish I was there. But online I'll have to do. But the speaker said, you know, that what was her point? That 70% of adults have access to legal cannabis, and 30% of adults have full access, and 70% have access to medical. You know, so we're really at a point where it's the majority of people, if you need it, you can access it. That's wonderful. And I think even if you say you're using it recreationally, I think there's a medicinal component to the recreational use, because we all have social anxiety when you're getting into a, social environment with your friends, and you're stressed and anxious and worried that you're not going to, that you didn't wear the right clothes, or that, you're not as comfortable at this particular location, or you're not as successful as that friend. And all of those feelings really pile on when you're in social environments, and using cannabis in those circumstances really helps to just let you relax and enjoy the experience, and that's where you see all of the great healing hormones and the neurotransmitters that deliver in, and that people benefit from with social experiences.
Yeah, Andrew and I, we talked a little bit about MJ BizCon before you got into the Zoom room with us. And we mentioned the fact about essential. And Chris Walsh, who's the CEO of MJ Biz Daily and gave the initial remarks at MJ BizCon today online, talked about that and how that was such a significant development in the legitimacy of the movement. And even John McKay, who was the CEO of Whole Foods, Chris asked him a great question right off the bat. And he said, we've been after you to be a speaker at our convention for a number of years. You always said no. Why did you say yes this year. And his answer was along those same lines. He says, well, even 4 years ago, I talked to my PR group and got consulting from them. And they said, the downside to appearing at a cannabis convention probably outweighs the positive. And that was 4 years ago. And here we are reversing it. And now he's speaking there, so we have, even in that 4-year period, a major company like Whole Foods recognizes that perhaps, it might be time to get on this bandwagon, because even the Gallup poll says 68% of Americans want to see this thing legalized.
Yeah. Well, and that's really, his point. I enjoyed that interview so much, where he talked about how, they wanted to get into it, and there's certainly a market share to get into it, and there's value, but then there's also the issue that, if it gets shut down, you don't want federal people raiding Whole Foods. So he really let everybody else take that risk ahead of him. And then once it had permeated pretty well, it makes a good point that as an industry, we have to work really hard to provide products that have value, and to be very clear in our messaging about their level of function, what people can expect, so that people really feel safe, and that they have a clear understanding of what kind of result they're going to get from using the products. We don't want to sell this, even though, the problem is, though, fundamentally, is that in so many situations of ill health, you're dealing with inflammation. And if you control inflammation, you control all kinds of things, right? You control arthritis syndromes and painful muscle syndromes and muscle spasm and headache and low back pain. There's and all kinds of abdominal symptoms. So really, it's, if you're treating like in this very base way, it makes sense that an aspirin works in a whole bunch of situations,
Right.
And the same thing with CBD, but that sales pitch sounds really snake oily to a lot of people, that it can work in so many different ways.
Yeah, but you even mentioned it, and Andrew, I'm going to bring you into this because you're in the trenches. You're at a medical dispensary just outside of Boston, 3 locations, and the recreational versus the medicinal use, or even the perception. How and all, I get it. RevClinics, all 3 medicinal dispensaries.
Happy to talk about that. Yeah.
Right. But as Mary talked about, even those that are going to recreational stores, they don't realize, I don't want to say the ease, but the process of getting your medical card has become easier for the public. Yes?
So, yeah, I'll start by talking about ease of access. So I'm very happy to see that now I think COVID has motivated so much technology change and growth in such a short period of time. I remember pre-COVID, my sister, who's going to college in California, she was basically bugging me to, like, when she would come back home, to like get her illicit cannabis. And I said, you're going to school in California. It is so easy to get legal, easy, excellent cannabis. So she had a med card to her name in about 45 minutes. She virtualed, she FaceTimed. This is pre-COVID with a doctor. The doctor's office was set up to do that. It wasn't until COVID in Massachusetts that we now have that same technology, right? There was nothing holding us back from that, rather than a lack of desire to innovate. But the difference between recreational and medicinal, I'm very proud and happy that we've been able to stay open throughout the entire time. We've had an extraordinarily small, I believe it's 4 total cases of COVID, each of them in our entire company. Each of them has led to exactly 0 cases of intercompany spread. So we identified that employee, they tested positive outside of the work environment. We locked down the facility, we sanitized, we put really strong procedures in place. But getting to the difference between recreational and medical was one of the very first lessons I learned when I entered the industry. The company I was working for did a really excellent talk. They brought in a cannabis doctor who specialized. And what he said is that you basically have 2 customer types. You have customers who want to feel normal. We might call these the normal patient customers. They are using cannabis to achieve a very specific result. Cannabis is allowing them, whether it's CBD that's allowing them to do more with their daily routine. They can be slightly more active over time with no psychoactive, with no stony effects, essentially. So there's that group of customers who is seeking a product to solve a problem, right? They are looking to achieve a very specific, like, bodily or mental result. Then there's another group of customers who sort of wants the hottest thing, the newest thing, the highest testing thing, the most exciting thing. We might call those the traditional adult use or recreational customers. They're the customer who is excited when there are new products on the menu. These are the customers who are like, I've tried that before. I don't want the same thing I had last time. Versus the medical customer who generally, once they find a product that works for them, what their main concern is like, is it consistently available? And that's what will solidify a relationship between a patient and a provider, like a dispensary like ours, is can we provide them consistently a product that's giving them the result they want? To me, that's the primary distinction between, I mean, I am also someone who started out as an adult use user. And as Mary said, I'm someone who benefits from reduced social anxiety, right? I use cannabis to fall asleep. I use cannabis in place of many of the medications that I used for a decade to manage attention deficit disorder. So there are all kinds of ways that we can introduce cannabis into productive, high-functioning lives that do not translate to like the stereotype, I think, that we were all raised with on television of like the super stoner, right? Like there are a lot of very high functioning, intelligent people and every kind of person in between who can benefit from cannabis, medical or otherwise.
You know, I really think that in a lot of situations, these blue zones that you hear about where people live longer lives and they live highly purposeful lives well into their advanced age, and everybody's always trying to uncover the secret of the octogenarian, like that is still operating in the operating room, or the octogenarian who's still carrying the water for the family. Like what makes that person in, you know, in a higher number in certain populations, where in other populations like ours, a lot of 80-year-old people are just sitting in a chair, you know, without any value and without having a lot of fun, you know. And I think in a lot of cases, you're really underestimating the amount of use of products that reduce social anxiety and help to ease the situation and make people feel better, that makes life so much more valuable for them and keeps them in a community. You know, a lot of people tend to isolate and start to take things personally and start to not, you know, interface with other people as effectively, especially as they get older. But, you know, you look at the Italians, these blue zone Italians that live forever, and they drink a bunch of red wine, and everybody says, oh, it's the resveratrol in the wine, or it's the Mediterranean diet. But what I think it actually is the alcohol in the wine. and they feel fantastic. They hang out with each other. They have conversations. Nobody's taken anything personally. And, you know, and I think if we looked into these pockets in China, we'd be able to identify that there's some mood altering product, and it might be cannabis in that case, where people are able to just relax and chill with each other.
Relax and chill. Now that's nice to hear, you know, especially during these difficult times. This has been the most challenging time, certainly of my lifetime. I mean, I do remember the 60s. I do remember the protest era. I do remember three of the greatest leaders of my lifetime getting shot. So there's certainly been some tumult in the 60s and 70s during that protest era, during the Vietnam War. But this particular time period, it's affecting everybody, and it goes across political lines.
Yeah.
It goes across socioeconomic lines. It goes across racial lines, although we've seen more cases of those people who are people of color have had more problems with COVID, and it reflects, and it goes to cannabis again. Anytime that there's something going on, it does seem to be exacerbated by our socioeconomic divisions. And even John Mackey talked about this a little bit in his speech today, his talk today at MJ BizCon, that the one percenters, you know what I'm talking about, right? They're the ones that are getting all the benefits, and they seem to live in that ivory tower, if you will, and the rest of the world has to handle all these challenges. And
It's so hard to know, Jimmy, which direction to be sad about first. I
right.
mean, our government is in such disarray, and then I find myself dreaming about the pandemic a lot. And last night, that was a good share of the evening, and working on novel ways to stimulate the immune system. I was like, I mean, it was a pleasant evening because I spent the whole of it in a laboratory, and that was fun. I do like to spend time in a laboratory.
Are you a science geek or what? I mean, that's great. You have a home lab. You have a home lab,
Yeah,
right?
I suppose if somebody else dreamed that, they'd wake up having, I'm hearing that the dentists are saying that people are fracturing their teeth. They're finding teeth fractures a lot because people are grinding so hard at night. But, but it is really changing the structure and nature of my sleep. And I've been trying to crack that egg, for myself and for my patients during this whole pandemic, really trying to ease on sleep and sleep efficacy. And I wondered, what your experience has been at your, I mean, because like I said, you're getting a whole bunch of people in front of you at your dispensary. I've been seeing a lot of people upping their CBN, and I know that the research on the CBN is a little where the laboratory data suggested that it had more sedating potential, but then subsequent small studies didn't necessarily support, but some animal research supports. So, I mean, what's working? What's working for people?
So we are absolutely seeing an uptick both in purchasing, in spending, we're specifically seeing an increase in, we always see, whenever you see an increase, you see increases in flour, edibles, but we can't make CBN fast enough, frankly. So we have a unique cocktail, unique to Revolutionary Clinics. It is a 4 to 2 to 1 ratio, 4, I believe, THC, 2 CBN, 2 CBD, 1 CBN. But basically the plan there is that we anecdotally absolutely are hearing feedback that CBN is effective for sleep. So the cocktail that we've put together is really meant to CBD to reduce inflammation and to sort of THC for pain management, and then CBN for provoking drowsiness. So we've had tremendously positive feedback. We call that our Astaria, sort of like stars in the sky as you go to sleep. So our Astaria cocktail. But we call that our sleep cartridge. And we have an entire laboratory devoted to turning THC vaporizer oil into CBN vaporizer oil. At any given moment, we've got like 80 square feet devoted to, 20 some odd like hot plates that are just, because it's quite a process.
I was going to say, do you just put it out in the sun?
Oh, I wish it was that easy. But yeah, it is truly like a bunch of Lazy Susan hot plates that sort of stir and stir for about 2 weeks. Because we found out that if you make CBD pure, you actually will create like a little bulletproof brick. You can't vape it, you can't smoke it. You can make an indestructible barrier out of it, but it basically turns to plastic when you have pure CBN. So you need, in order to maintain a liquid state, you need THC, or you need all other cannabinoids in there, basically. So we sort of stumbled upon this happy formula of THC, CBN, and CBD as this cocktail together, and we've had really positive feedback.
Well, now what if you had the pure? Oh, really? Your mom uses it? Good for you. Yeah. That's awesome that you've been able to work with her and help her. Let me ask you this: when you're using the CBN and it turns into a solid, if it's administered as a solid, as a pure CBN, does it disperse with the exposure to the hydrochloric acid? I've been hearing about hydrochloric acid exposure and the way that it might change THC and promote the production of THC from other cannabinoids, but I don't really have that research solidly.
So I'm not exactly familiar. I know that there are many cannabinoids and terpenes which increase the efficacy or absorption rate, basically that increase your body's ability to absorb. I actually don't know if we've done studies with the solid. I think initially the product for the masses that we found seems to be this vape oil cartridge, just as a way to cheaply and mass produce as many of these things. Because frankly, we kept upping the price on CBN for a while and we kept selling out. So we were not able, because frankly, it's much cheaper to produce THC than it is to produce CBN. So for us, we were trying to make business sense of how to serve a medical customer base and have product that's readily available.
Wow.
So we landed,
I
It's a
love
challenge.
the vape because, you know, the vape is brilliant for serving a medical customer base, because here you are trying to fall asleep and you finally decide I'm going to do something, and you take an Ambien or, you know, a prescription therapy, and then you wait for 40
Right.
or 50 minutes or an hour. And at this point, if you're already coming up on where you only have 7 hours left to sleep and you can't fall asleep, then, you know, you're not, you've already lost. But the
Right.
inhalation methods are such rapid onset, so
Right.
you could put a product together like the one you described, and somebody could take one inhalation and literally wait, you know, 2 minutes, and then
Right.
if they aren't totally feeling it at 5 or 6 minutes, one more inhalation, and voila.
Yeah.
That's a
And then
brilliant way to put. That's a brilliant way to do this.
to solve your question about edibles, like of course there are customers and medical users who don't want to do any form of inhalation. So I know that we are working toward an edible sublingual form factor, like a breath mint style, sort of an Altoid
Right.
style. We
Mhm.
have a brand that we work with that is a mint maker, Mr. Moxie's, and so they have one of the number one sublingual edible mints in the California, Colorado, and Oregon markets. And so right now we're making sativa indica hybrid, right? It's really rare to find truly full spectrum edibles, right? Edibles that
Mhm.
actually convey the effects of the flower that they originate from. Most edibles are made with raw THC oil, which is why so many people their reaction to edibles is, oh, edibles make me drowsy. People tend to love edibles, or they say edibles make me drowsy. So that is a goal for us. We currently are making these like lineage specific sativa indica hybrid varieties, an energizing edible, a relaxing edible, a one-to-one sort of centering edible. But CBN is the next major cannabinoid. It's definitely the fastest growing cannabinoid in our business, next to CBD.
Yeah,
I
CBN
just
has a
hope we
lot of
don't see
potential.
CBN at a gas station like you see CBD. Okay.
No, that stuff terrifies me.
I'm with you on that. I will. And you mentioned the mints. I've had the mints. That's why I raised my hand. I've used the mints. I've liked the mints. Edibles.
I think I have those right here.
Yeah, you can hold them up. Terrific. Edibles
Very pretty
versus
packaging.
inhalation.
Nice.
Okay? Edibles give you that whole body effect, if you will. Certainly great for pain. But there's that uncontrollable feeling sometimes, the titration and the dosage. And
Oh my gosh.
Right. I'm still a little uncomfortable when I take an edible, and I might get a little too buzzed, and it happened on Thanksgiving Day, guys. Okay, I'll be perfectly honest with you. And I use straight CBD out of the bottle, like 2 droppers full, just to calm myself down. And I was amazed that it worked.
It's a perfect parachute. It just pops the THC off the receptors and then and helps to just promote relaxation instead of that excessive high. I'm so glad that worked for you, because I mean, everybody who has used an edible has a very bad story about using an edible. Everybody. So you've got
their nightmarish edible experience. And Andrew, as someone who's in the trenches, I mean, how do you explain that to people? And I know the mantra is you start low and you go slow. And we know that there's a delayed onset, right? And by the way, that delayed onset, I have found, depending on your metabolism and who's using it or whatever, could take 20 minutes, an hour, 2 hours, 4 hours sometimes. There's no predicting. So I guess as a doctor, Mary, okay, how do you can certainly do the preaching, go low, and see how it reacts. You have to self-medicate and use yourself as a guinea pig. And that can be scary for a lot of people who don't have, let's say, as much experience as a 63-year-old guy like myself.
Yeah, they need to have a parachute in place. I mean, I think anytime, but I really like to start with an inhalation model and give people an easy to titrate product, and then or a sublingual, and I don't know. I'd really like your opinion on this too. I don't know if you go by Andy or Andrew.
And I love Andrew.
Mary,
do you? Thank you. And do you prefer Mary or Dr. Clifton? I'm very happy.
I don't know. I guess whatever. Dr. Mary is kind of my game.
Dr. Mary. I like Dr. Mary. Thank you, Dr. Mary. Yes, Andrew is perfect.
Andrew. I think I would go by Andrew too, or maybe Drew. Did you ever go by Drew?
it's funny. I went by my last name for a while. My last name is Elk, so sometimes people called me Moose. But Drew, my girlfriend sometimes calls me. Yes.
Yeah, I think that's probably what I would do if I was you, but it's such a great name because Mary is just Mary. There's no other choice. but yeah, going back to the different methods, I really like to start people on something that they have 100% control over. But it's amazing how many times people will tell me, I want an edible. And then I tell them, I'd really like you to try, an inhalation first. We'll figure out what you need. And then we'll transition you to an edible 2 or 3 times a day. And then they basically say, I want an edible. People just don't see a danger to a gummy bear or a cookie. And it's hard I can't really be clear about, I just have to be clear about being very careful with your dosing when you're using an edible. But it's a hard sell to convert the person who really wants to use an edible into an inhalation, because they're just not going to do it.
Interesting. Right. I want to ask a question. First of all, Dr. Mary, can you hang out for a little while, because we really don't have anybody lined up next, and we'd love to continue this conversation. Are
sure.
you okay with that?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right. I appreciate that. We are going to take a little break. We always do about a half hour in or so. So let's take a little break. We'll come back on the other side. And I do want to talk to you both about the vaping. And, we've had some discussions in the past about the dangers of vaping. We understand what happened with vitamin E acetate, and that was horrific. But I do want to talk about the benefits of vaping as opposed to smoking or not. So we'll have that after this. Don't go away. Hi, I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media. And as a sportscaster on TV and radio for 25 years, people always thought I was an expert on sports. They used to come up to me at bars and go, "Hey, sports guy, are the Bruins going to win the Stanley Cup or what?" I didn't know then, and I don't know now. Just because I reported on sports and talked intelligently about my love for sports, I was not an expert. I was a talk show host, an anchor, a reporter. Sure enough, the same is true in the cannabis industry. Now, even though it's been around for thousands of years, research is just beginning. The difference, of course, is that there are no real experts in the cannabis space. However, we all believe that we're experts in our own field. For instance, we at Pro Cannabis Media have 75 years of combined experience in commercial media, buying, production, and strategic market planning. Now, we want to help you control your message. After all, you're probably considered an expert in your field, whether that's lighting or containers, law, interior design, or even security systems. We already have an expert in the insurance business for MRBs, that's marijuana-related businesses. Bill Perrier from Charles River Insurance is our expert. He's a member of our PCM Gold Club of experts, and he explains that one of the largest insurers in the world is now writing insurance for cannabis farmers.
Lloyd's of London, 325 years old, the standard bearer in the market, has a company called Chesterfield Brokers that have launched this parametric insurance for crops.
Insurance is all about timing, and it's a shame we couldn't have got these programs up for the farmers and the other cannabis growers who've been really affected by those West Coast fires.
We also have an accountant for the cannabis space. He's a CPA, Rick Leneve of Accounting Buds, and we rely on both of them for their expertise, and we showcase their expertise in our news and talk shows. In fact, we'll put them inside our original content, and we can talk to them. It's kind of like product placement. So show off your knowledge inside our content as we position your expertise in your field. And you do that by joining our Cannabis Gold Club of experts. That's where you get a chance to show our audience your expertise in your field. This group of entrepreneurs will serve as a referral network in order to generate leads for your business and, of course, build your expertise because it'll be shared during our weekly news and talk shows. So if you want to take advantage of our following and the original content we produce on a weekly basis, contact me, Jimmy Young, or our sales team today. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Take your Zoom call podcasts or webinars to a whole new level.
Nurse Mark and the Green Nurse Podcast. We are here.
That's right. PCM can animate your logo, add eye-catching full-screen graphics, and lower third identifying motion graphics. Look like the network. Act like the network.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
And welcome back to Cannabis Chat for a Wednesday afternoon. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. We're in the studio in Wellesley, just outside of Boston, but we're also talking with Andrew Elk, who's in Somerville, Davis Square, another place outside of Boston, and Dr. Mary Clifton, who is down in the what we call the tri-state area. Is that right, Mary? I mean, New York is part of the tri-state area, is it not?
Yeah, I'm sort of in a suburb of Boston, basically.
Well, we are in a suburb of New York.
That's what I was going to say.
It is. It's just a shoot, you know?
I just like to remind everyone that it all started in Boston. Let's just say with a party, and I guarantee you, not that I was around in 1774, I think, Boston Tea Party. I guarantee you there was cannabis somewhere in that area going on somewhere.
The founding fathers were obsessed. I believe Abraham Lincoln, the famous line goes, Abraham Lincoln separated seeds to determine which of his hemp plants were most potent.
Really?
It's like the founding fathers famously smoked cannabis. They spoke and wrote on the idea that it was like Abraham Lincoln wrote in his diaries that this is a plant that is intoxicating, but it grows from the land and it should not be like the same way back in the day they didn't want alcohol prohibition. They were saying the same things in the 1700s about cannabis, which is wild. That we have historical records that are like, yeah, Westerners have been having this argument for literally centuries.
That's fantastic. I didn't know. I mean, there must be somewhere like a group of quotations from famous people in cannabis. That would be a fun thing to put in, in future books or documentaries. That would be a lot of fun. I could see how there'd be a million great ways to use that.
And I think I know someone who's working on a documentary in a book too.
Yeah. I feel like the time to work on the next big project is, right after you finish the last big project. So I do have to get the marketing and everything pulled together around that book, but then you are like, what's next, But actually, more video assets around that book is going to be a good thing to help it. And then we can do, master classes around it and sell it with the document, we just pull things together into really cool little, all kinds of different things that we can provide a lot of high value for. I'd like to get a gorgeous journal together for people who can write down how they're choosing and using and how that response is. There's just so many great products that people need when they're starting out in cannabis, or even when you're in the middle of your journey. Like a coloring book, something that has some coloring and some spaces where you can write down your thoughts and opportunities for abstract coloring. I have this great coloring book that has these really beautiful women in it. And I've been putting tattoos on them instead of just coloring them like ordinary coloring. But that's, for very certain times. That doesn't happen often when I have that time to relax. But sometimes when I'm with my grandkids, I'll, fool around with crayons and have a lot of fun, playing with that kind of stuff.
You do not look like you're old enough to have grandchildren. I'm sorry.
Yeah, Jimmy, you have to find a great plastic surgeon and then you just do every single thing he says. That's the secret to looking young. just fake
we understand that. And thankfully, I was blessed with the last name.
And cannabis, yeah.
Thankfully, I was blessed with a last name that will always keep me forever.
Oh, yeah. You will always be Mr. Young.
There you go.
I think when you think about cannabis and cellular apoptosis,
I think about cellular apoptosis all the time. I have no idea what that is.
all the time. Well,
what is that?
well, I mean, your body's cells turn over, at there's a process it goes through where a cell is created, and then there's the reactive oxygen species pathways. When you burn oxygen, you create those reactive pathways, and the MAPK pathway and ceramides are all closely associated with cellular longevity and aging, and helping a cell to move to the identification that it's time to die. And cancer cells often get around all those pathways, and they learn how to be immortal, or they learn to live a lot longer than an ordinary cell should. So when you introduce CBD and other cannabinoids into cancer cells, at least in petri dishes, it helps all of those cellular pathways to go back into a more normal apoptosis, which is just cell death. That's the apoptotic pathway. Normal death.
Normal cellular. So I think I've heard some of obviously, Dr. Mary, I'm so grateful to have your incredible detail and background. I think what I've heard maybe you talk about, sometimes described as like homeostasis, right? Like people have a hard time understanding how cannabis can do all of these different things. And really they're doing what you're talking about, which is like any cell that starts to get itself out of whack, any bodily process that is deviating, either because of inflammation, which means that your body is sending more cells to an area to fight that inflammation. That's where that redness comes from. Cannabis is actually bringing like homeostatically, homeostasis is this idea that your cells are right in the range they want to be. If they get too high on that range, that's bad. If they get too low on that range, that's bad. But I think that's tying in, just this is a little bit of nugget I had.
Yeah, it works the same way in inflammation to stabilize, but it also helps cells that are on a weird pathway and not recognizing that they should die. It helps them to, move toward a normal cellular death. Because cancer cells, like you remember that book, The Immortal Life of Henrietta Hacks or something? It was about those cervical cancer cells that are still being used today because they refuse to die. They're in petri dishes all over the world, and we study cervical cancer with them. But that's how cancer cells work. But then they get too big for the organism to support. But I do think that you can see less aging with regular cannabis use, because you do drive cells toward that normal cell death and allow things to regenerate on probably a faster path. Because I think that cellular apoptosis, the whole process decreases, as time passes. You don't regenerate as quickly as when you're a youngin' like you, Andrew.
Oh, thank you.
I got a few years on you.
I get it. I get it. Okay. I get it. I do want to go back to what we talked about right before the break about the vaping. Okay.
Oh, yes.
When I first got my medical card in 2013, when Massachusetts first started its program, and I went in and had my little discussion with my patient advocate / bud tender, and got poor advice. It wasn't Revolutionary Clinics, by the way, because you guys didn't.
I'm so glad to hear that.
It didn't exist in 2013. Okay.
Not yet.
That's right. But I do, I talk to a lot of nurse practitioners and registered nurses and cannabis experts about the vaping of the oil, and how some doctors believe that vaping of oil is not natural in your lungs. But what I try to say to them, I say, now, wait a second. When you have a child and you're a parent and your kid's coughing, you put steam on in the bathtub, in the bathroom, and you bring the kid in so he can breathe vapor, which eases the hacking of the cough. So now I understand that's vapor of water, or, becomes steam. Okay. Right. And vapor of oil isn't steam, but it is still a vapor. So I guess my question is, what's safest?
Well, I mean, I absolutely want to defer to the doctor in the conversation for safety. I can provide maybe just a nugget from my anecdotal experience, what we preach at a medical dispensary, and then I'd really love to turn it over to Dr. Mary. So as our head of production, this is the guy who leads all of our new product development. This is the executive in our company who looks after new product creation and development. What he likes to say is that no form of inhaling any kind of combusted material, whether it's like the 2014 slogan from Leafly back in 2014 was "Be wise, vaporize." And Jimmy, what you're getting at is that if we're comparing combustion of flower versus the vaporization of flower, you're talking about smoke that you're inhaling that's at about 1,000 degrees. That's the temperature of a lit tip of a joint. Our throat doesn't like anything that's 1,000 degrees. That's why water pipes are popular, right? They're using either long glass systems or water to cool, condition, and smooth that so that by the time it gets to our throat and lungs, we cough less. Now, vaporize, but the choice, this is what our executive says to us, the choice to use any kind of, for him, vaporizing is safer and healthier. And he is frankly medicating for an injury that he sustained pretty early in life. And him using vaporized cannabis means that he doesn't need to use opiates. So he is making an informed choice that using vaporizer products are the right product for his set of needs. But when it comes to like vaping oil, what's safest as far as I understand it is we don't want additives. We don't want cutters. We don't want thinning agents. We want pure cannabinoids or terpenes, which are THC, CBD, basically the cannabis chemical compound. But really, I should, for safety and health, I gotta turn it over to Mary. Thank you for letting me go first.
Oh, go ahead.
Dr. Mary.
No, that was really great input. I mean, I love the point about no additives. It was really it's the glycerol and it's the sugars that are breaking down into the formaldehyde, which is really, I mean, the vapes came into the United States with the idea that they were going to decrease tobacco addiction, that they could help with tobacco cessation programs, and they actually, I think, ended up increasing tobacco use. And there's so many people who really are heavily addicted to their vapes. But then there might be an issue with the way that the vaporizer is made, if it's made with a cheap metal like cadmium, or if it's instead made with a stainless steel. So the quality of the vaporizer itself is important. But I think a lot of it has to do with the additives, and particularly the flavorings, because the diacetyls, the products that create the flavorings are generally recognized as safe, but for oral ingestion. And we know that some of these products can cause irreversible lung disease in people who started out with healthy lungs. We know that they can cause, asthma attacks or COPD exacerbations for people who have lung disease. So the inhalation of these flavorings are in large part the problem. And also, as Andrew points out, you're really looking at vaporizing pure cannabis rather than these additive oils too. I mean, the oils you have to use with tobacco, or you have to use them with, CBD, because the best cutting agent for CBD is THC. But if you're using a pure CBD vape, you can't do that. And then you're adding the oils. And then I can't remember. Can you remember, Andrew, which product it is that creates that beautiful big white cloud? And
polyethylene glycol, PEG. Yeah.
And I mean that's no good. But the consumer really, I mean, you see that all the time in advertising, where somebody is just completely obliterated when they exhale with this big white cloud. And that's, actually a sign of something you should never exhale. Yeah. But I agree with you. When you burn the product, you release, 80 different carcinogens, right? And if you vape, and you do that, even if you just vape whole flower and you're toasting it rather than setting it aflame, you're releasing 1/10 of the carcinogens. So it's a great idea in terms of reducing risk, but still helping to reduce inflammation, not only in the lung tissue, but also systemically, if the vape is done properly. I mean,
exactly.
Yeah.
Like proper, like safe products. That's what you want. Sorry, Jimmy, go ahead.
No, I was going to say, that's why I go to RevClinics. That's why I go to a reputable medical dispensary, because they are there to provide you with medicine that will be safe to ingest. That's the idea, right?
To give you an example, to give you an example of what RevClinics, what we might call an honest and good operator is doing. So we are sourcing, so let's start with some of the great points that Mary made. First, we got to talk about what is the technology. There's the product itself, there's the vaporizer oil, which needs to be free of additives and thinners. Revolutionary Clinics was born in 2017. We were actually born after. You can actually go back to 2013, 2014, when the first polyethylene glycol crises were sort of popping off in California markets and Massachusetts markets. The reason that PEG, this thinner, sort of came into notoriety is that in the beginning, when cannabis producers were creating their very first vape oil cartridges, right? So they didn't know what they were doing. Mary was talking earlier, and I talked earlier about how in order to stabilize certain cannabinoids like CBN, CBD, you need either THC or some kind of oil base in order to be able to inhale these cannabinoids. In the beginning, none of the operators really knew what they were doing, right? They were making these dark, thick, black, very purple colored vape oil cartridges, and no one, you couldn't heat them up and inhale them, which is why compounds like PEG, vitamin E acetate, these are chemicals that's what they do. They thin things so that they can aerosolize more effectively. And then that is what it was those aerosolizers and thinners that led to what Mary was talking about with irreversible lung damage, right? I'm very proud to say the Revolutionary Clinics, because we were born after the PEG crisis, we learned from other operators like sort of early mistakes. So we have never in any way, shape, or form used cutters, thinners, thinning agents, aerosolizers. In no way, shape, or form ever have we used those. And then after VapeGate, what I like to refer to as September 2019 in Massachusetts, Governor Baker changed laws such that now every single vaporizer product, whether it's a vaporizer cartridge, whether it's a vape oil applicator, anything that has the word vape associated with it, you get a little card that shows you that RevClinics is buying the absolute highest quality stainless steel and platinum coated, medical grade stainless steel. It is not cheap for us to do this. There are absolutely inferior hardware out there that we could purchase and make more money on, but we're a medical dispensary. Our first priority is serving medical patients successfully and safely. So it comes down to quality product and quality hardware. And it's not easy to source that, but it is essential. We have found.
But when this whole thing went down, all of a sudden I saw cigarettes on the streets of New York, and and it occurred to me that I never saw anybody smoke. Everybody is vaping. And then after that crisis in September, everybody started to smoke. And then it wasn't 6 weeks. It might have been 2 months. All of a sudden, nobody smoked again. People love to vape. It's so private. And I don't know what the tobacco industry is doing or how they're thinning their products anymore. But I'm just not interested in the tobacco industry enough to try to figure it out. I mean, that's just a't we need to use more CBD and cannabis to get people off their tobacco, right? But I do love when you're putting together just a gorgeous vape, that you're cutting the waste. I mean, I've had lunch with my friend Warren Babrow in New York, and he'll be just back from a California trip, and he'll be like, try this, taking out and he's got something in every pocket. He's so adorable and pleasant to spend time with. He's just such a delightful man. But if you ever get a lunch date with Warren, I mean, just at 100%, that's a date to go on. But then, then it's just a vape. It's got 40 inhalations, and when you're done, you throw it out. How is that a good idea? There's a whole bunch of work that went into the creation of this vape. So when you're creating a super high quality stainless steel and platinum, I'm sure that your little cartridges snap in and snap out, and the only thing I'm throwing out is this little bit. I appreciate that.
Absolutely. I'm actually going to grab my product I've got right here, but I adore this thing. But again, you're right. At this point, I remember in 2017 when I joined the industry, back then, every cartridge you had to screw
I'm all
on.
can you?
Yes, so it just magnetically drops in there.
Oh, I love it when it's magnetic. Yeah. That's so neat.
I use the C-cell. The C-cell cartridge.
So yes.
Yeah.
We do have the C-Cell, that's sort of little palm battery. We carry many different types of batteries. This is sort of our latest and greatest.
It's
called
solar
the Aero
powered?
Pro.
No.
Just shy of, but it is USB-C. And actually it has this lovely little like nonagon 9-sided shapes that when I lay this down, it doesn't roll like all over my desk. It actually stays stationary. So you can stand it upright. But again, like you're saying, Mary, it's these little adjustments that make the technology more user-friendly.
And decrease waste.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Reduce waste and bring more people into cannabis consumption, right? Like my mother, for example, has zero interest in smoking a joint, doesn't want anything to do with it, but she'll do edibles and she'll do vapes. It's like you got to find the right product for the right person.
Andrew, how old's your mom?
My mother is, I don't think it's polite to say a woman's age, but she
Give me a
is
range.
62.
All right, so she's my. All right, fair enough. Thank you. She's my age.
That's a good range. You know, she's somewhere between 61 and 63.
Right, that works for me. I'm in there. I call that age appropriate. I think that's awesome. You know, one of the things you talk, the disposable vape. Now, is that recyclable or not recyclable? I mean, really great question, Jimmy.
So there is not a single operator from California to Maine who has figured out how to successfully recycle vaporizer cartridges. And I'll tell you why. The second you put marijuana vape oil, whether you're in California, Colorado, Massachusetts, doesn't matter where you are, every state in the union has what are called hazardous waste protection measures. It's part of the compliance industry that goes along with many industries. But basically, the second vape oil touches this product, the U.S. government considers this hazardous waste, which means no recycler can take it, touch it, or do anything with it until you have a certificate of authenticity that proves that you have less than 0.03. That is the federal limit for THC in products. Like you can sense if CBD has less than 0.03 THC, you can move it. I'm sure Dr. Mary knows this. You can't move any CBD product that has more THC than that. So in order to recycle, remember, what is recycling? Recycling is taking a product from one place, usually a house, to a recycling center. The reason the recycling center takes your product is because they are going to wash it, process it, and sell it to someone else. Like that is what makes a product recyclable. Like it's why some days like plastic milk jugs are recyclable, and the next day, if the price of plastic drops, that jug just became trash, right? That is the recycling system as it exists in the United States. So in order to recycle these, you, either the individual who is buying these cartridges, or if we took them back, we basically have to set up an entire processing center where all we did all day long was sterilize cartridges and then pay about, I think it's $35 to $75 a test. Maybe it's more than that. I haven't checked the laboratory standards, but every single cartridge will need its own test where we prove that you boiled every little bit of THC out of there. So there are actually
just so you could fill it again with THC.
Just so you could fill it again. In order to do this legally, Jimmy, that's what we're on right now. As the law exists today, there are art collectives. There are people in California and Colorado who are making sculptures out of empty cartridges. They're actually buying empty cartridges because remember, you can't make this into an art installation because it is a hazardous waste product. And if we don't prove that we are destroying these to the state, and what does destruction mean? It means we put in a big an industrial blender with kitty litter. That is destruction at most dispensaries. Like if you don't do that, you're shut down. Like that is the status of recycling. So people say to me like, oh, I wish that product, it's not recyclable, is it? And like, it's not recyclable anywhere in the world. There is no way to recycle these cartridges right now. So
well, you learn something new every day. I mean, you would think now with the cost of gas going so low that it's going to take the bottom out of the recycling industry because they'll just have a ton of plastic to be able to produce. Well, for a very low cost.
But it's a complicated problem to solve, Jimmy. That's what I'm really trying to get at. Recycling is a tricky issue.
Yeah, and I interviewed a guy out in California recently who's all about that, creating that zero waste industry that inside the cannabis space. So he's got a lot of work to do too. But I got to tell you, Dr. Mary Clifton, I think we could talk for the next 4 hours and we'd still learn and be entertaining and educational. And that's why we do what we do. And I so appreciate you taking the time today to join us again. And I can't wait to talk with you off air, as we say, to kind of continue how we might be able to work together, because I so respect what you do. Your knowledge base is incredible. I wish I understood half the words you used, because I'm like a history major, you know?
I wish I knew anything about history. I always have to ask people like exactly when things happen.
You teach me chemistry, I'll teach you history. Andrew taught me a history lesson today. So we all have something to learn from each other. And that's why I love Educational Wednesdays, Professor Weed Wednesdays. So Dr. Mary Clifton, first of all, how can people find you? How can people find you? Give yourself a plug.
Oh, well, check out my certification program at the Cannabinoid Protocol, and available for bud tenders or for dispensaries to use for all of their bud tenders, or just for coaches, for individuals who want to work in a coaching aspect in their community to help people learn how to choose and use cannabis.
Fantastic. Well, we've got another couple of guests coming up in the final half hour. The Canna Cook couple from Arkansas. It's Chris and Chelsie Miles. Hang in there. We'll be back with more. Dr. Mary Clifton, thank you so much. Andrew, you don't go anywhere.
Thank you, Dr. Mary. We're going to connect you and I. I'm going to connect you with those bud tenders.
Awesome.
Thank you. And we'll be back with more of this show after this. Don't go away.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
Well, hello there. Here we are again, another live stream from the new studio of Pro Cannabis Media. This is Cannabis Chat, and I'm Jimmy Young. Hi, everyone. Welcome to Weed Talk News. I'm Jimmy Young, the founder of Pro Cannabis Media.
And I'm Kurt Dalton, the founder of Cannabis.net.
Every week, Kurt and I get together to review some of the biggest stories in the cannabis industry. He and I talk about them. We have a few comments, and then we get reports from Canada, New York, and Washington, D.C.
And this week's no different, Jimmy. We finally have Vermont moving toward recreational cannabis with retail opening in their state. We have an old state and a new state, Colorado and Illinois, both setting cannabis sales records in July, as well as multiple efforts to legalize the cannabis plant in America, including our friend Steve D'Angelo getting involved.
But first, let's go to Deborah Borchardt in New York to check on the financial weed scene. Deborah?
Thanks, Kurt. Thanks, Jimmy. Well, things seem to keep going the wrong way for Charlotte's Web.
Whoa, Jimmy Young, in the weeds on the water this week. We've got the CEO of Kushko, Nick Kovacevic, with me. This guy has built his little company in 6 years from $2 billion in sales to $145 million in sales.
We can get this thing to be fully legal here in the next few years, I believe, but it's going to take far longer for the stigma to change.
I think you guys are the pro-cannabis story.
And I love Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, I'm Jody Roberts with Eastern Security State, and I love Pro Cannabis Media.
Hi, I'm Laura Beener. I'm the president co-founder of The Healing Rose, and I love Pro Cannabis Media. It's been such an integral part of our success here at The Healing Rose.
And you know what? The best media company out there is Pro Cannabis Media. Look out for them. They'll make you famous.
Hi, I'm George, and I love Pro Cannabis Media. I also love Western Mass Hydroponics, where we've got everything you need from seed to bloom to bud, and then to smoke it afterwards.
Take your Zoom call podcasts or webinars to a whole new level.
Nurse Mark and the Green Nurse Podcast. We are here.
That's right. PCM can animate your logo, add eye-catching full-screen graphics, and lower third identifying motion graphics. Look like the network. Act like the network.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
All right, we're back. Welcome back to Cannabis Chat for a Wednesday afternoon. We are head-to-head with the National Football League. We're head-to-head with MJ BizCon, and we're still generating audience, and I so appreciate that. I'm Jimmy Young from Pro Cannabis Media. We're here every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, 4 p.m. to 6 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And what we do here is we talk about cannabis. It's a talk show about cannabis. And on Mondays, we call it Cannabinoid Medicine Mondays, Medicinal Mondays. Wednesday, Professor Weed Wednesdays, when we talk to educators. And of course, there's a lot of doctors, nurses, and that sort of thing involved with education, because we all have something to learn. And Lord knows, after the last hour, my head's exploding with chemistry terms. And then on Fridays, we call it the Green Rush. I'm joined by David Rabinovitz in studio. He's a financial consultant, and we talk about the business of cannabis. And that's what we do on Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays here on Pro Cannabis Media. And of course, we live stream it on all of our social media outlets out there. But now we're so happy to welcome in two people that are really newcomers into my world, because we've connected through this show, through LinkedIn, through a connection that we share with Kurt Dalton and Cannabis.net. And it's Chelsie and Chris Miles from Arkansas, and they are the principals of CannaCook.com. Chris and Chelsie, thank you so much.
Hello.
Hey, good to see you guys again.
Hey guys, thank you so much for having us on.
And can't wait to hear what's going on in Arkansas when it comes to cooking with cannabis. Tell us a little bit about your background, how you came upon creating a cooking channel for cannabis.
Sure. All right. Yeah. Well, we started last year in 2019. We both are medical marijuana patients here in Arkansas, and I was doing web development at the time and started doing some stuff in the cannabis industry. And Chelsie and I saw a real need, especially here in Arkansas, for education with cannabis. We both have seen how it works medicinally in our lives and in our families' lives, but still in this state, there is such a stigma attached to it. And
unfortunately.
And the way that the medical program is in this state, it's caused products to be very expensive, especially things to cook with and edibles and things like that. So we really decided to take, she was working in the medical field in 2019, and we said, you know what, we're going to start this at the end of 2019, and in 2020, we're really going to go for it. And so that's how CannaCook.com was born.
There you go.
That's awesome.
And Andrew Elk is with us. He's a director of training and education at Revolutionary Clinics, which is a medical dispensary here in Massachusetts.
Okay.
And, yeah. And Andrew, we become friends, and Revolutionary Clinics is a very, well, they've been big supporters of my dream here and my shows over the years. But Andrew also is can I call you an amateur chef, Andrew?
I think that would be fair. Definitely amateur. Chef, I like the word amateur better than chef.
That's cool though.
So
I do
cook with cannabis.
Is showing that anybody can cook with
That's
cannabis.
right.
Before we started CannaCook.com, I mean, we weren't cooks or chefs or anything
No,
like that. We did
far
a little
from
bit
it.
of cooking at home, but for the most part, you know, we weren't like professional chefs or anything. And that was our aim too with CannaCook, was to show that, you know, anybody who is a cannabis patient, they can learn to do this
That's
with
right.
their medicine.
You don't have to be professional to be able to cook with cannabis.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
And one of the things that we wanted to do too was take the stress off of the patients from experimenting with medication, because again, of how expensive it is in this state.
Mm-hmm.
So we take all the risk in experimenting with different recipes and things, and really making some cool things happen, like, you know, infused bee pollen or, you know, infused salt, things like that. We've really been able to do.
Andrew, I know you have questions for these two, so I want you to just jump in any old time. But
absolutely,
I do want to ask a little bit about the. We talked offline a little bit about the challenges of being a medical patient in Arkansas because of the various. They still don't recognize a few of the most, what I would consider to be the most obvious diagnosis that cannabis can help. They don't recognize. Is it PTSD? Isn't that one of them?
No, they recognize PTSD. It's anxiety and
ADHD
that they don't recognize.
Which is what I am certified for in the state of Massachusetts.
Right,
Yeah,
and absolutely should be on there. I mean, ADHD
Completely.
has awesome, treatment with cannabis.
It's helped me a tremendous amount.
And luckily, you were able to get your certification due to a migraine still.
Mhm.
But yeah, Arkansas has some really funny rules. And like another weird rule we have, we can't have pre-rolls in this state. So we can't go buy anything pre-rolled because I guess they think we're going to smoke it. I really don't know.
They are convenient. The pre-roll is a convenient, but I will tell you, with the expense of the product now and the intensity of the product now, using a pre-roll, you lose a lot of the smoke. You lose a lot of the product in the air because you're either passing it or you're taking an inhalation and then it's burning. So what I've done actually, and Andrew, I think you'll find this ingenious, is I take my pre-rolls, obviously, and open them up and put them in my little dugout or my one hitter. And then I use my little widget on the end for a little filter. And it's a very smooth experience, let's just say. And it's basically one hit at a time.
Very smart.
Yeah.
That's what happens
I think you
when
guys
you get old and you've done it for so long. Anyway.
But I think what you're getting at is the flexibility, right? There's still a lot of options that aren't available in all the markets across the United States, right? Like you might have tinctures, but you won't have pre-rolls, which really it's about, like, to your point, like, of course people want to smoke it. I mean, in Massachusetts, we have different silly rules, right? We can't call a product a gummy, but we can make and sell what we call a fruit chew, right? And it's just very silly because gummies are for children. Adults don't like to eat gummies. I love to eat gummies.
Right?
Me too.
Yeah, us too. Absolutely.
But these silly loopholes that are very specific state by state. I'd love to hear some of the other specific like challenges that you face in Arkansas, because every state is so different.
Sure. Well, one of the other things that's really crazy is, like you were talking about with the gummies, is all of the candy has to be black colored or white. It cannot be like a bright color or anything. They consider it that kids would maybe want it. You can't get anything above 10 milligrams a serving in this state. So if you buy, say, gummies, it can only be 10 milligrams per serving. If you buy
the whole package, or can you have multiple in a package?
Per serving.
Got it.
But
Got it.
10 per package.
So you're getting 100 milligrams for 10 gummies. I mean, you got to eat the whole package if you have a tolerance. And another really odd thing that we've run into in this state is the shortage of flour. We recently, we've got almost 100,000 patients now in Arkansas, and I think we only have 4 or 5 producing cultivators still, even though there's 8 licenses.
Wow.
And this,
it's been going on for a year, and they're still not growing.
Well, and we became legal in 2016, but a lot of us who got our cards early, it was useless, and no dispensaries came out until 2018, I think it was. Yeah.
Wow.
What are the rules about home grow?
Oh, no way here.
No way.
Nope. Although all our neighboring states, well, I don't know about below us, but anyways, Oklahoma, Missouri, and Tennessee, I believe, all have some sort of growing.
You can grow, but in here you cannot grow.
Right. And then, of course, we've got Oklahoma right next door to us. We can get a temporary card for Oklahoma, but then we can't bring it across the state lines. We face prosecution if we bring it over the state lines.
Yep.
And that's the same in Massachusetts and Rhode Island and Connecticut, actually, right? All these states around us. Massachusetts has the Massachusetts medical certification. Like, I think California and Colorado, they're simpatico. Like, you can walk a med card from California to Colorado and back and forth, but you can't. Massachusetts doesn't play with anybody. So if you have a card, which I think is probably similar, it sounds like, to Oklahoma and your situation in Arkansas. It's like we have a deal with Rhode Island. But yeah, it's so random. It's so random.
Mm-hmm. Well, and another thing too is we have patients come into our state and purchase, but then we can't go out of state and purchase. So that's why we're running out of flower in the state. We've got patients because Missouri, recently passed. They're coming down because their cultivators and dispensaries aren't all set up yet, buying flower here, and then they've got no limit. They can buy 2.5 ounces, walk out of the store, walk right back in. Whereas we, as Arkansas patients, can only buy 2.5 ounces per every 14 days.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
So how do you get your stuff? I mean, if you're limited that much, and I know when you cook, you tend to go through more.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. It has been a struggle to get stuff.
Luckily we get a few little donations here and there of trim to work with. And, but otherwise we also spend probably $400 a week on cannabis right now.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. So how many operators, like how many storefronts do you have? You have 4 growers, it sounds like.
4 or 5, I think, right now that are growing, but we've got 33, I think, operational cultivators right now. And I think 36 is total, but there's a few places where they're petitioning to get another dispensary because of the population size. I think Pine Bluff, Arkansas is one of those places.
Yeah.
And Fort Smith maybe is one
Little
of those
Rock,
places.
I think, was one of them.
Okay, yeah. So yeah, there's a few places petitioning to get additional dispensaries down there. But the thing with the cultivator has been just ridiculous. And then it came out recently in the local news that Arkansas has what's called a medical marijuana commission. The lead guy, it turns out he's a lawyer. He had ties to one of the cultivators and was representing them as a lawyer before awarding them a cultivating license.
Wow.
So
major conflict of interest.
There's a lot of shady stuff going on here. So, I started a petition for that. We got some signatures, but he's, I think, out of there now as of November. So thankfully for that, but it's just been a lot of shady stuff in this state.
My goodness.
What's your favorite dish to create? What's the favorite product that you've been able to cook?
My favorite thing to make is gummies. We go through batches of gummies.
Yeah.
I don't even know how many times a month in this house. I mean, we are constantly pumping out gummies. And one of my new favorite ones is cannabis infused hot chocolate.
Yes.
Oh, primo. I'm
Sounds
making that
amazing.
again tonight. It's amazing.
How do you infuse the hot chocolate? I'm sorry, I want to hear.
Use almond milk. I infuse the almond milk, and then I use the almond milk and the hot cocoa, and it is amazing.
Wow.
We've also infused sugar. We've used an alcohol extract and then soaked the sugar in it and let the sugar dry, and then you've got cannabis infused sugar as well. So that's another, you can actually double.
Yeah.
Double do that recipe.
We'll have to do that tonight.
Double dose. That's incredible. Now, do you guys ever work with like distillate or CO2 oil? Do you ever use like cannabis concentrates to make edibles, or are you like a flower only operation?
Right now, we have been flower only because we just the pricing and stuff like that. So we've been trying to play with it right now, and we want to eventually expand and have a section on the site for that.
Absolutely.
But yeah, right now we are flower only, but we do have some videos on the site that have some, working with distillate and all that from other people.
I'm looking at your dosing calculator, and I think I've used literally your dosing calculator. Right? We did a big Thanksgiving smorgasbord last year, and so we infused like cranberry sauce, gravy, mashed potatoes, like stuffing, there was a dessert as well. But it was this dosing calculator. So I'm on your website.
Oh, that's cool. Very cool.
That's what I want to do one of these years, is make a whole infused Thanksgiving meal and just have a lot of people over and eat.
Yeah, we've got an infused gravy recipe on there, but we haven't gotten to do a whole meal. We did this year, when nobody really got to come over, so we didn't get to make a huge infused meal for everybody.
I was going to say, how many people were at your Thanksgiving table this year?
Just the two
Just
of us.
us, yeah.
But
everybody quarantined or at home.
Yep.
Right.
This is my other question, because it relates to like gathering and bringing people together. How have you found in Arkansas it's been for like, how are the people who live in the places where these businesses are popping up? Are the people of Arkansas you found, are they receptive to cannabis? Are they excited about new business coming, or is it mostly skepticism that you've encountered?
I would say it's a dichotomy at the moment. I would say more of the majority of people are for it and support it, but there still are the older generation here or the religious, religious population here that are still pretty against it. In fact, there's I forget the name of the group, but they still make a lot of propaganda against it here in the state of Arkansas.
Yep.
Yeah, that's the NIMBY group, the Not in My Backyard group. This is
right.
Which is wild because we've seen in the Colorado and California markets that property values increase around cannabis like operations, right?
Yes.
Like we are bringing like our factory, for example, we have 1 million square foot of factory, a former shoe factory, dead center in the center of Massachusetts, right? We're a small state, but right there in the middle. And that's our production distribution center. We have 2/3, about 1 million square feet of this, like if you imagine a big horseshoe building, and it's us next door to like an old folks home. And they love us. We're great neighbors. But we have brought, I think, like over 150 new jobs, like high paying entry level jobs to like a depressed factory town. You know, there's a lot of good that comes out of cannabis businesses.
Well,
That's great.
This is what happened. This is what happened in Holyoke under Mayor Alex Morse's leadership there. They have embraced the industry and they have turned that whole city around, basically repurposing a lot of those old factories that have closed. And that's exactly what you guys did it's in Fitchburg, isn't it?
Fitchburg, Massachusetts.
Yeah.
Back in the center of Massachusetts.
Literally in the center of Massachusetts. Where do you, I don't know, have you guys heard the news today? There's been two very major news stories regarding the UN, the World Health Organization, and also the U.S. House of Representatives Committee is going to push the MORE Act onto the floor to vote on legalization and expungement of records on Friday in the United States. And we all recognize that that really won't mean much. It's more of a historic and symbolic vote because we both recognize what will happen next is it'll end up at the Senate, and you know who's involved with that, let's just say. Little turtle face there is not going to do anything to help the cause. You guys know who I'm talking about when I talk about turtle face?
Yeah.
Mitch McConnell. And it was not my name for him. It's just my brother came up with it, and I just thought it fit so perfectly.
Oh, it is. He looks like a caricature of that or something. Absolutely.
It's Yertle. It's Yertle the turtle. Okay.
Yertle. Now I'll never be able to think of him as anything else but Yertle the turtle.
And Lord knows we know Dr. Seuss may have partaken. I'm just going out on a limb here. Just going out on a limb here. Where do you guys see us in 6 months, 5 years?
6 months, I think that we are still going to be facing a lot of the challenges that we are right now, but I hope to see some movement, with the new changes in offices taking place and all that. I think in 5 years, I think by then we will see a federal legalization by then, and a very loosening of regulations and things like that.
I think a lot of people will be more accepting of as well. I think people will realize that, hey, cannabis is actually great and helpful, and people will start recognizing that. And I think it'll be less stigmatized in 5 years than what it is now.
Absolutely.
Hopefully.
I mean, if you could take a state like Arkansas and have 100,000 cannabis patients when they projected like 5 times less than that at the beginning, and it grows that fast here. I think just seeing the change in a lot of attitude here, I think in 5 years we're going to see a nation where it's become just intertwined with us. And not to sound grandiose, but just like you were talking about with bringing jobs and things, I really think cannabis is one of those things that could bring not just the U.S., but the world out of a lot of problems. I mean, we could find sustainable housing. We could, there's just limitless possibilities with it. So if we can see legalization, I also think that we're going to see a lot of things that open up jobs in for housing or, like facilities to grow or whatever, and I really think that it will help our economy for the United States. It might be something that really turns it around and starts getting us away from debt rather than further into it.
Right. Well, I'm all for that. I just want to live long enough to see it. I didn't think I'd get to this point where I'd be talking about it on a regular basis in a studio outside my hometown, but it's come to be here, and we're talking about it and we're learning about it. In fact, every day, I always say somebody always has something to teach us. What was the last thing that you learned about cannabis that perhaps you didn't understand or realize? And I'm going to go, Andrew, I want you to answer that too.
Goodness.
Oh, I can remember this. This is actually super relevant because we're talking about edibles. So terpenes. Terpenes are these flavor and aromatic chemicals that are known to cannabis. They play a role in the effects that cannabis has on us, right? So sativa or energizing, uplifting strains, there's a class and family of these aromatic smell chemicals called terpenes, right? Wine has terpenes. Any botanical source has terpenes. They're basically smell chemicals. They have names like limonene that comes from lemon peel, pinene that comes from pine sap. Some of them, like myrcene, are really prevalent in indica strains that make people relax. They're body relaxers. If you give myrcene to a sumo wrestler and a boa constrictor and a 35-year-old woman, it does the same thing to all those three groups of people. It relaxes their muscles. So terpenes are sort of at the cutting edge of what we understand in contemporary cannabis science. For a long time, we just thought it was THC, CBD, these cannabinoids. But now we're starting to understand that cannabinoids and terpenes, or terps, are about two sides of the coin. But what's exciting about terpenes, people love to talk about terpenes in what I call inhalables, where you're like smoking flower, where you're dabbing marijuana concentrate products. But a lot of times you'll also see terpenes in edible products. People like we at RevClinics have made our, I think it's called our strawberry cheesecake bar, which has a straw nana. It's a white chocolate bar base with straw nana terpenes. Has this puffed Rice Krispie cereal in it. So it's got a little bit of crunch. It's very white, very sweet. Has this strawberry banana note. But people will ask me, oh, you put strawberry banana terpenes in this bar. Is that going to impart the effect of a straw nana flower cannabis strain into that chocolate bar? And unfortunately, that we find that not to be the case, at least right now, because it's very different when your body digests terpenes from when they inhale terpenes. So terpenes are this sort of ubiquitous term in cannabis. If your product has terpenes, that means you've got a good product, is sort of how a lot of people talk about. That's the shorthand. It's like, oh, does your product, is it terpy? Does it have terps? Sort of like an insider's term. But edibles, like, it's very cool and exciting to flavor things with terpenes because it stays all within the cannabis product. But it's important to understand that like terpenes and edibles and terpenes and edibles are for flavor, where they're much more for flavor and effect when it comes. That was a very new realization. I thought that terpenes were the same, whether you rubbed them on your skin or whether you ate them or whether you inhaled them. And they're actually more specific than that. That's the last thing I feel like I learned.
Tough act to follow, Chris and Chelsea.
That is a tough one.
Education's my job. It's my bread and butter.
Well, I did want to say one thing about that is we've teamed up with another company, and we're working on something. It's like a terpene guide with temperatures and stuff. And another thing in the future on Cannacook we're working on. We've been collecting information on it now for a while, and we've got another person that's helping us with it, is working on a pairing guide. We want to create a pairing guide with food and terpenes. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's the future.
Yeah, so I'm trying to come up with something I've learned recently. I would say learning that cannabis was so prevalent in the beginning of Christianity and used in like anointment oil and things like that. That for me was something learning recently that was very cool to kind of relate to people here who, maybe are really religious or things like that.
Whenever we first started cooking, we kind of just jumped right in with cannabis. We didn't do anything with hemp or CBD. And so when we actually started cooking a lot with CBD this year, we realized that, wow, you have to cook a little bit different with CBD, like when you're decarbing and CBG and, all of the different things, they all cook a little bit different. At first, I just kind of assumed, it's all the same thing, but it's definitely not. So that one was something for me to learn.
Yeah, so like CBD, you want to decarb that at 215. Yeah, 215, and CBG at 215 for 60. No, yes, Hemp is 70 to 80 minutes at 220.
220.
CBG is 215 for 60 minutes, and THC is also 220 for 60 minutes.
So, got different variations in there that you have to do.
And then with different terpenes and stuff too, you can do different temperatures that will help release those a little bit better. And that's something we were working on on a product later that we're going to release. It's going to be pretty cool.
Very cool. Well, you guys are pretty cool as a couple. I got to tell you, I've enjoyed getting to be
well,
friends with you.
Thanks.
And
you know what? We've known each other now over half our lives.
Yeah.
We were originally college sweethearts, and then we kind of went on our separate ways for a while because I went down a kind of a crazy journey. And then after I got my ex back together, she came back into my life. So it's I'm really with my best friend.
Makes it easy. Makes it really easy.
Yeah, it does.
Fantastic.
We're constantly each day like we have the coolest job in the world.
That's right.
I wouldn't change it for anything.
That's great. And it's going to get better, guys. We're looking forward to working with you, checking out your shows and stuff and growing and learning together, because
that's right.
That's the thing about the plant. And Andrew, you and I have discussed this, the socialization of the plant and the fact that, it all evolved with, back in the day when it was really illegal, right? And we'd sneak around the corner and we'd be passing a joint and someone would smell it. A complete stranger would come into the circle and would, hey, come over here. Yep. There's that socialization thing and that bond. And now it goes on in the industry, and now it goes on amongst other people from different states. And so the socialization is still there, but it's just a different way of coming together. And of course, now with COVID, where we're all trying to stay, socially distant and apart, and stuff, we're states apart now. So we're definitely distanced, but in a lot of ways we've bonded together because of this. And that's really important to me. But I want to, again, where can people find you?
Hey, you guys can find us at cannacook.com. Or you can find us on social media. Same thing. Just search the word Cannacook and we'll come right up.
There you go. And that's Chris and Chelsie Miles from Arkansas, Andrew Elk from Somerville and other places, and Revolutionary Clinics. Andrew, thank you again so much. And one more plug for RevClinics. Go ahead.
Revolutionaryclinics.org. Or on Instagram, Facebook, Twitch, and YouTube at RevClinics, REV Clinics, revolutionaryclinics.org. Thank you.
There you go. So everybody can be found on the internet. You can find us here at Pro Cannabis Media. We so appreciate you taking the time out of your day to learn a little something about this amazing plant. So for everybody here at Pro Cannabis Media, I'm Jimmy Young. Remember, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Let's use it responsibly and safely.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.
When Warren Bobrow isn't writing for Forbes magazine, he's probably mixing up his favorite rum drink or consuming his favorite blend of cannabis sativa. Bob Rowe is a party master, and now he's on In the Weeds with Jimmy Young. Revolutionary Clinics, where the patient comes first.
He's an Emerson College graduate, class of 84.
85 was my graduate year, but I should have been 84. But anyway,
I
took a lot of drugs.
Well, it was the 80s after all, I just want to say. That being said, Warren is also a freelance writer for Forbes.
Correct, yes.
And Forbes magazine, obviously the premier business magazine in the United States and around the world. And one of their great additions every year is when you guys rank the sports teams, because I am a sports nut.
I heard that you were a sports guy, and it's very funny that I would not be a sports guy, but sports and not sports, there must be something there.
But more importantly, there's other things that we do have in common. One, I'm not an author. He's had 6 books.
6 books, yes.
Can you tell me a little bit about the 6 books without going into each detail? Because you are a mixologist, a master mixologist, which means you're comfortable with alcohol, and I think you're also comfortable with cannabis, but we'll get to that in a minute.
I wanted to write books that introduced a consciousness of the way things were done back in the 1800s. So I wrote my first book, Apothecary Cocktails, set up the stage to be able to discuss things that went on in the early apothecary. Little did I know that alongside the early apothecary, there was an apothecary that used cannabis as healing. And in the early part of the, the 19th centuries, the 1800s, in the United States, they were using cannabis as an adjunct to healing, as well as alcohol. So alcohol, you would go to your pharmacist to be able to have a cocktail, but the only ingredient that really did anything was potentially the cannabis that they were using at the time.
So you're basically a medicine man when you get right.
Well, a snake oil medicine man. And that leads into, my family background in snake oil, because my grandfather, everyone's of a certain age, they might not know this, but he manufactured a product called Geritol. And Geritol was little more than whiskey. It was ethyl alcohol, caramel coloring, and flavorings. And it was meant to cure something called iron poor blood, which no one had, iron poor anemia. But it was snake oil, truly snake oil. So when people come to me and they say, will you please write about my CBD product? I say, my grandfather made it, Geritol. Look it up. Snake oil, same thing.
Same thing. And yet it does have medicinal qualities. This is the whole point.
Well, whiskey did. My grandmother lived to 105, and she drank whiskey every day. So go figure.
Quite the family. The Bob Rowe, but okay, what's the other side?
She was the Bob Rowe side. The Geritol side was Rosenhaus.
Like Drew Rosenhaus.
Yeah, my cousin.
Hence the cousin, right? Okay, there you go. And still, you don't like sports. You're not into sports.
Not at all. Yeah.
Warren, I know you and I are kind of age appropriate. This is what I say. Anybody within 10 years of my age of 62, I like to talk to because you can relate.
My wife's older than you are, but I won't tell you what her age is. She's 7 years my senior, and I'm 58.
Okay, so you do the math. Fair enough. I got it. I actually could do that math. That being said, I want to go back to one of my kind of go-to questions is, did you ever think in your lifetime, and I'm just going to use Massachusetts because you went to school here, that cannabis would be in a legal state in Massachusetts for adults in 2020?
Well, I always knew it was liberal here, and being probably the last liberal in New Jersey, I would say that I was not surprised that New Jersey is still illegal because they're so stigmatized against it. But Massachusetts and Maine have more of an open perspective to cannabis and cannabis propagation, and also to the enjoyment of cannabis in public. I mean, I walk down the street in New York City and smell cannabis burning, and I smell it here in Boston as well. But there are other places that I don't smell it, and that would be like Morristown, New Jersey, where I live, because if you were to smoke cannabis in the street in Morristown, New Jersey, you'd probably get arrested.
I know I'm going out on a limb here, but one of the things that I rail against, and either we talk with Kurt and Jimmy or on In the Weeds, is the injustices of our criminal system, the fact that our jails are filled with people of color who have been arrested over the years for not only people of color, a majority, however, for drug offenses.
Personal experience with this in New York City, and
tell me about
it. It was not pretty. It was during the Bloomberg era, and I was with my then wife, first wife, and I was smoking in front of a restaurant named Esca, which is down on 42nd Street off of 8th Avenue, I believe. And I walked outside to smoke a joint because I'm not a big drinker, but I, do drink socially.
But you were a mixologist. You're a master mixologist.
But I wasn't then. I was working in a bank, and I was pretty conservative. I didn't have this, long hair or anything. And I went out to smoke a joint, and the police who arrested me said that they smelled it over 3 blocks away. It was BC Bud. I had just been out in Vancouver. I brought some back with me. I lit it up, and boy, the world came down on me.
And how did that work out for you?
48 hours in Rikers Island. It was not pretty.
That kind of shakes me up a little bit, because when I hear stories, and I go back to those who have been most affected by the war on drugs and filling our prisons, I say the only difference between me and those guys is they got caught and they're black and I'm white. I never got caught.
It's easy to get caught, and it's easy to get arrested, and it's easy to not be given the phone call that everyone else gets, and it's easy to be held in protective custody because they didn't charge me, so they could hold me indefinitely. It wasn't fun. And my late father, I remember at the time, he said it was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. Yes, it was a good thing that happened to me? No, it wasn't a good thing that happened. It was a good thing for the future because now I have credibility, but it wasn't a good thing because they literally took 48 hours of my life.
And it's obviously I can see the change in your tone and not pleasant 48 hours to say the least.
They were animals. They were animals, and at least the black kids, they stick together, and and the first thing that one of the biggest guys in the holding cell came up to me and said, "What are you here for?" And I said, "I got caught smoking a joint." And he said, "Don't worry, you'll be okay."
Wow.
He said, "Good thing you didn't hurt a child because you'd be dead by now."
Well, I teach kids anyway, so I try to give back to the next generation with some of the wisdom that I've learned, and I'm guessing that you probably have a little wisdom since you're a writer and you've been through some things that I would never have been through.
It's not Law and Order.
No, it's boom boom. I had to do that. So let's talk a little bit about the future of cannabis, because right now we're in the most challenging time in my lifetime for political situation, one of the biggest elections in the fall. It has become a political issue, more obviously on the Democratic side, because there's 10 people in that race, maybe 8 or 9. I haven't checked. People are dropping out.
This morning.
That's right. But you mentioned Michael Bloomberg. What are your impressions of him, and does he have a shot here?
Oh, he absolutely has a shot. I think anyone has a shot. If I wanted to run for president, I would have a shot too. Just look at the person that's up there. He has no experience. So, I mean, really, anyone could be anything they want to be.
This guy has kind of lowered the bar, hasn't he?
He has absolutely lowered the bar. It is just pure scum.
Well, another thing we have in common.
My late father was, edified this man, and that's why we didn't speak at the end, because he, the man couldn't do anything wrong, and I knew better.
Yes. So, in fact, barely a day goes by where he doesn't do anything wrong.
What is right then?
Well, and we're not getting into right. That's right. Ethics. How about morality? How about respect?
There's no ethics, and there's two different types of law in this country. If I was to drive down Newbury Street at 100 miles an hour the wrong way, you bet that they would arrest me.
Absolutely.
You bet they would.
And I actually would prefer that, because you would be a threat to public safety.
Of course, but there's an imminent threat right now in this world, and something has to be done. And the best way to do is to register and to vote.
Yeah, and it's what I tell these kids in my class every day. If you're over 18, it's probably the most important thing you'll ever do in your life.
So in 2016, I was over in Moscow, in Russia. I was teaching a class at the Moscow Bar Show, an advanced class of rum. And every single person in the room did not want to talk about rum. They wanted to talk about why American kids don't vote. That's what they wanted to hear. That's what they had an American in front of them. I was the only one there at the Moscow Bar Show that year. And they wanted to know why Americans their age don't vote. And what could I say? I was told, I had 2 handlers, and they said, don't talk politics. And I know not to talk politics in Russia. Everyone wanted to know about politics. And that was the most interesting conversation that I've had in many years, because they would give their left arm to be able to vote and vote in a free election, yet American youth does not vote.
And I'm not quite sure we can debate the free election part, since you have to drop billions of dollars on media to even run in this country.
Oh, yeah.
And that eliminates just about everything.
That's why Bloomberg, he is who he is, and I think he's good. I think he's a good guy. I haven't met him. He's a self-made person. I'm self-made, so I understand completely where he's coming from, and that scares a lot of people.
He softened his approach on cannabis. I believe it just came out today. He's talking about decriminalizing it.
Good. I mean, because Biden has done nothing but speak out against it, so he lost my vote. Even though I would still vote the party line, still, as a person, I felt very poorly about him that he would say that it was stigmatized still. And it is stigmatized still, and that's the difficulty that I see. There's a huge stigma.
We're moving closer, though. We're moving the envelope. And look, the NCIA, the lobbyist group that's running this Northeast Cannabis Business Expo here at the Heinz Auditorium in Boston, which is where we're doing this interview and where you and I met, they've done a great job of at least getting attention and pushing the federal government to at least recognize that the states have a different idea about this and really just want to be left alone to do whatever they want to do.
Good luck with that in New Jersey, because drugs are bad. I mean, truly. And even though I have a cannabis card in New Jersey to be able to smoke as any place that cigarettes are smoked, still, I don't like to smoke in public because I would have to go into the system. If I was arrested, they would, check my name out, make sure I have the right, supply. What I have in my bag here,
really want to go into your bag, don't you, Warren?
I have stuff from all over the world. Maybe not all over the world, but all over the United States. And the problem is, it's illegal. So we have
one
the
here is
Shaolin Canagar.
Can we open this one?
Yeah, sure. You can open it up.
I used to call this a boomba. Here, you open it, because I've got arthritic fingers. These containers are not made for people with arthritic. They're made to keep children out, but
to keep kids away from.
Right, and
so this is a Shaolin Canagar. This is a handmade, beautiful.
I'm showing it tight to the camera for those of you who are watching, as opposed to just listening. Yeah. It's a true cigar. It's like a Dutch master.
It's wrapped in rice paper and gold. There's different cannabis strains. There's different oils and waxes and resins. And
it's a mix. It's a mixologist joint.
Yes, very much so.
Did you purchase this? Make this?
Yes, I did. No, I purchased it. This comes from a young man named Chris Louie. He lives in Denver, Colorado. It's the Shaolin Canagar.
All right. And you actually told me how much that particular item cost.
It's over $200.
$200 for that one thing. Needless to say, you don't smoke it all in one time.
It lasts like 2 or 3 hours. Do you know I wrote a book called Cannabis Cocktails, Mocktails, and Tonics that we haven't mentioned, and I teach you to put THC into craft spirits and then mix tasty little cocktails. I destroyed them on live TV on Vice, and they wanted to have a CBD cocktail that they could feel, and that's the biggest crock of what. Because CBD doesn't get you high, it doesn't do anything.
Well, don't say it doesn't do anything. Well, now I'm not sure I'm going to agree with that. I've talked to a lot of scientists about not just CBD but CBN.
CBN, yeah. So this is a ganjarilla. Yeah, careful with that one. That was
a ganjarilla.
That's a Cuban leaf tobacco. I very rarely smoke tobacco, but this is a Cuban leaf aged 5 years. And then the cannabis is from Northern California. It's really gorgeous stuff.
From Humboldt County.
From Humboldt County, correct.
Which still, I believe, 80% of the illicit market comes from Humboldt County.
Isn't it amazing? And good people get arrested for doing not so good things.
Yes, and I think that law enforcement really doesn't want to do it anymore, to be honest with you, because there are attorney generals that don't want to prosecute crimes for cannabis because there's so much, movement on making this product a legal product across the world.
This is a dog walker or a friend maker. Do you know why?
Well, it's short and sweet.
Short and sweet, right? Because it only has enough. Right, exactly. You do. You absolutely go to the head of the class. I would light this up here. No, okay.
Let's not do that, okay? Yeah. We're not. By the way, even if it was a cigarette, I wouldn't want you to open it up or light it up because we're in a public. We don't want to do that. I don't want to cause any more trouble. And by the way, Warren, I think you're a troublemaker. I just want to say deep down.
I am absolutely. Yeah, it probably comes from a lot of things. Do you know I'm coming out with a beverage?
Yeah, this is what I want to talk to you about is the infusion world, right? Because we had a chef on that infuses private dinners with THC and CBD products. And why do you say that's trouble?
Because you can't. Because there's no way of telling what the dosage is. They have very little ability of telling what the dosage is.
Well, actually, they talk to each individual person, so they want to find out your history with the product. And then they do know in each individual what they insert in the product because they have a dropper to do it.
But everyone is different, and everyone has, what affects me might not affect you, what affects someone else.
Did you lose something? This is what happens when you smoke weed, You never remember where your keys are, right? Am I right?
Oh, absolutely. Keys, wallet, phone. Keys, wallet, phone. I had it somewhere. Anyway, it's
Can we go back to the infusion debate, please? Because as a mixologist, though, I would think that you do support the idea that in 10, 15, 20 years from now, we will have an infused menu available at restaurants and then they'll have licenses. Or do you think that, am I too radical on that?
I think you're too radical on that. I think there's a lot of stigmas that are still around. I'm going to be speaking about that at Benzinga next month in Miami Beach. I think that we live in a stigmatized society. And it's troublesome. It really is. What it does is it perpetuates the idea that drugs are bad, and they're not. You know, if anything, alcohol is bad. Alcohol is poisonous. Absolutely. And I feel very, very strongly about saying that because, well, it's just my own personal experience. I don't drink anymore. I developed glaucoma, and I felt that drinking had a lot to do with it. And I was being very careful of my own body and the way I took care of myself, and I wanted to live another 100 years. So I knew I wasn't going to do it with booze. And cannabis for me is my elixir. It also lowers my eye pressure because I have glaucoma. So my eye pressure has dropped down below normal, which is pretty good considering I've only been in the program in New Jersey for about 3 years.
New Jersey has a medical program. They have, I believe, 6 dispensaries, I think I read somewhere?
That's what they have right now is 6.
And there's pressure to obviously open up a lot more in that state. What holds up? What is is stigma still the biggest thing that holds up any legislature from moving forward on this?
Yeah, I mean, I'm probably the only Democrat in Morris County. I think we have a Democrat mayor, but who knows for how long. And, the people are really conservative, and they are really closed minds. And I look to my own family. I mean, they look at me, and I'm certainly persona non gratis. And
that's got to hurt.
Made me the black wool. They have no idea what I do. They have absolutely no idea what I do.
They know you're a writer, I'm guessing.
No, not even that. Not even that.
Do they know that you're the black sheep of the family, pretty much?
Well, I was signed off on. Yeah, I think that's the word. Signed off.
Another thing we might have in common, although I don't think my family would ever admit that. I have a great family anyway.
They wouldn't admit that they had that I was their son.
That's a tough thing to handle. Any regrets, Warren?
Any regrets? No, not at all. I'm my own man. I support myself. I do everything I have to date by myself. And it's the person that I want to be when I grow up because that's who I am now. So I'm trying to find a picture of the beverage that I'm working on. I'm coming out with a beverage in hopefully by April.
Why don't you text that to me? Is that an iPhone?
It is an iPhone.
So you can airdrop it to me if you'd like. Don't do it while we're recording though. Okay, appreciate not right. Right, but I'll show it.
The cocktail is called Klaus. It's a mocktail. It's a THC infused. It's live resin, water soluble nanotechnology. It hits in 3 minutes, and it sends you. Well, it's about a 25-foot ceiling. It sends you up there.
It's a la la land. Where no alcohol? Where are you going to sell it?
Only California. Yeah. I'm having a producer put it together for me. We're using Mango Trainwreck as our strain, and the drink it's similar to a mule, but I take it into another direction because of the quality of the ingredients. I'm using a ginger syrup, which is a spicy ginger syrup from Pickett's in Denver, Colorado, made by my dear friend Matt Pickett. We're using the Boiron fruit flavors, the lime flavor from France. So it has a very distinctive European flavor.
Is that an aluminum can?
It is, but it's a very special aluminum can because the THC does not stick, and the person who's doing the production owns the patent on this can because THC does not stick to the inside like the other cans on the market. So we investigated that one very deeply. There's also 2 different types of bitters, an orange bitters and also a lemon bitters, which deepens and balances a craft cocktail.
Can I ask a question? How many ounces is in that?
8 3/4.
Okay, so you have created a product that you said if you have how many sips?
It hits after 3 minutes or so. So I would say
you don't have to down the whole can, though.
No, you don't. I would say each can would probably suffice for 2 people.
Okay. So that's my point.
Expensive enough. I mean, it's going to be about $14 a can. So that would probably get 2 people a nice, comfortable buzz. And if they were listening to me and have read my book Cannabis Cocktails, Mocktails, and Tonics, they would know that this type of drink would be delicious with like a 4-square rum. And then you get that nice
a rum drink.
And then you get that crossfade. Well, I'm a rum judge, so it's a crossfade.
There you go. So that's Klaus, and we'll be seeing that in California at some point.
California.
Now, do you need a license to sell that in California?
Yes, it's crazy, the amount of licenses. But that's why I have other partners, so they can hold the license. I hold the LLC. The LLC is in my name.
That's fantastic. And now, Warren, you've shown us a little bit about what's in your bag, okay? You're now showing me your product. What's a typical day in Warren Bob Rowe's life?
I do a lot of traveling. I just got back from, where was I? I was in Sacramento a couple weeks ago. I was in Denver a couple weeks before that. I was in San Francisco recently. I do a lot of traveling out to the West Coast. I really enjoy the West Coast. Just where it belongs. So.
That's probably where you belong. That's where I was going with that too.
I don't belong here.
Well, you belong at
even though I love New England, but it's so damn cold here. You know, I like a nice temperate environment. As I get older, not that I'm old, but as I get older, I'm more sensitive to the temperature.
I can totally relate to
falling down on ice. I do not like falling down on ice.
Well, we've had a very interesting winter here in Boston.
Any ice. There's a little
any snow. We're about 40 inches
snow. Exactly, compared to last year or the year before, yeah.
It does not bother me at all. Warren, what's next for you? Do you have another book on the horizon? I mean, you just so you got 6. I mean, what's 7? It's like the Patriots championships. You know, they have 6. We'd like 7.
I don't know. You know, my publisher is Cordo over in Beverly, Massachusetts, and I think the book I wrote on THC is probably the last book that they'll publish on THC, even though they did just publish an excellent book on CBD, but I have a lot of difficulty with CBD, perhaps because I haven't figured out what it actually does.
Well, it works in conjunction with the THC. That much I can tell you about the entourage effect, right?
But most individuals don't know about that because I get emails every single morning on my computer for CBD is the cure for cancer, and it's not. And that's, you know, I know it's all spam emails, but it's like the unregulated vitamin, you know, explosion in the 1990s. It's what is old is new again.
I'm going to throw this theory at you, something I've talked about many times on my In the Weeds podcast. I've talked to oncologists about this. I've talked to Dr. Ryan Zachlin about this, who's a cannabis expert in the area here. In 1937, I think you and I both agree, they outlawed the wrong drug.
Exactly. They should have outlawed alcohol and made that prescription only.
Right. But we know about DuPont and Hearst and the pulp industry and all this and Harry Anslinger and all these evil things. We've gone over this a million times. I get it. I asked an oncologist this. I said, you know, everybody's been looking for what caused cancer. How did we get to this point where it has been one of the biggest problems that we've had in modern society? You know, thinking back to the 40s and 50s when the first cases started to right? Yeah. So my point, you took
manipulation of genetics. That's what it is. But we look back and
it was used as a medicine and then taken away from humanity.
They took it out of our diet, which was really important for it to be in our diet. The endocannabinol system is in all of us. You know, for me, it goes back to absinthe. Absinthe was vilified as being a hallucinogen. There is more thujone, which is the active ingredient in absinthe, in an orange or in an onion than there is in 10 bottles of absinthe. But the problem is that the French government saw that absinthe sales were cutting into the sales of wine, so they vilified it. And they said it caused uncontrollable hallucinations, which led to Van Gogh cutting his ear. Well, big deal that he cut his ear. That wasn't the issue. The issue was that it was overreach by the government to regulate something which really did have beneficial, you know, proponents to it. And the thing that absinthe did so well is it had wormwood in it, and everyone had intestinal worms because there was no refrigeration. So wormwood rid the body of intestinal worms. That's what it was for. That's what wormwood was for. And also, Thujaun is another wonderful thing which works really well at at body lice. So you could put the absinthe over your hair, over your body, and it'll kill the lice. We shower today, so we definitely don't have those problems. But back in the 1800s, there wasn't really good indoor plumbing, and there wasn't really good, people weren't taking care of themselves like they take care of themselves today. So the fact is, there were a lot of things that were cured, quote unquote, cured by alcohol as a medicinal purpose, not as a recreational purpose. Right. Same thing with cannabis.
Yeah. And here we are still trying to educate the public, undo 80 years of propaganda and stigma. And the science and the research is really leading the way. When I first got my medical card, I really wanted to learn about this new medicinal product that was being sold legally with the card, right? New product. Well, you get what I'm saying.
Oh, of course.
Grown new. How's that?
Yes, of course. And it's something that has brought us to where we are today in this conference, where people get together who might not necessarily even smoke weed, but I like to call them out. I said, what the hell are you doing in our business?
That's right.
It's an investment for you? I mean, really.
Pretty much a lot of them are. And when you try to explain to them that you have this endocannabinoid system in every mammal, including humans, and this product is designed to interact with that to build your immune system.
Exactly. Right? Oh, absolutely. It made me feel better. It reduced the pressure in my eyes. It preserved my eyesight. It makes me a nicer and possibly kinder person, and I'm easier to get along with. And it probably saved my marriage as well.
And you are a true party master. To me, that is absolutely one of the greatest compliments you can give anyone.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. I can smoke all of you under the table. No problem.
That would not be difficult with me.
It's easy. Well, we can get started whenever you like.
I appreciate that. 420 is only a few hours away. Let's wait to the celebration of that. Bob Rowe.
Mangled.
I got Warren right.
You did. That was easy.
Thank you very much. Warren Bobrow.
You got it.
Warren Bobrow is his name. You can Google him, and you can come up with a whole bunch of stuff about him, including your story, which is pretty compelling. Thank you so much for sharing that with us.
It's my pleasure. It's really my honor, and I'm so happy that you're teaching at Emerson, my alma mater. I wish they would spend more time paying attention to me rather than some of those people like Henry Winkler, but that's okay. He's famous for who he is.
What are you doing at noontime? I control the class for an hour and 45 minutes. These kids have to sit there and listen to me.
I would love to come in and talk to you.
Well, we'll talk. We'll see about that. I have to go. I have this really good lesson plan that I worked on all day yesterday, so I'm really looking forward to that. But perhaps another time.
Oh, absolutely. I would come back up to do this.
I actually think we'll do something. I will pitch that to the Speakers Bureau because I think you would be terrific.
Thank you. I'm honored. Truly.
I like that. All right, well, this has been another edition of In the Weeds with Jimmy Young. And remember, folks, it's a whole new world of weed out there. Use it responsibly.
Don't look now, but it's a whole new world of weed out there. Pot is flower, it's Bruce Banner and Blue Dream. You've got bongs and dabs, resin and shatter, vaping and edibles, new terms, new strains, and new ways to use cannabis sativa, the plant. Some just made with CBD, and hemp has minimal THC. There's sativa and indica strains and 100 chemicals, all legal in 10 states for adult use. There's a lot to get to know. Get used to it, folks, because it's legal in the Bay State and it's not going away. Neither is In the Weeds with Jimmy Young next. Revolutionary Clinics is just one of 49 medical cannabis dispensaries in Massachusetts, but there's a reason why it's one of the most popular. It's their patient-first philosophy. All day long, they teach, they educate, they communicate about this complicated plant called cannabis sativa. That's true whether you visit their Cambridge location in Fresh Pond at 110 Fawcett Street or at 67 Broadway in Somerville. Revolutionary Clinics, where the patient comes first.
We are Pro Cannabis Media.